Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto awaken the power of the nine-tailed fox god and get married with Yoruichi Shihōin? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Ember of Divinity. The world was a symphony of endings, each note a discordant shriek of rain against ravaged stone. Consciousness, for Naruto Uzumaki, was a frayed rope, treading to snap with every agonizing pulse of his own blood. He was drowning, not in the deluge pouring from the heavens, but in the crimson tide welling up from the ruin of his own body. The air, thick with the scent of ozone and sodden earth, was afire in his lungs. Pain was the anchor holding him to this shattered reality, a sharp, insistent presence that dwarfed the colossal statues of Hashirama and Madara. Now broken sentinels over a valley of their own making. His senses were a chaotic maelstrom. The roar of the waterfall behind him was a distant, mocking applause. The intermittent flashes of lightning illuminated a tableau of devastation, a world scoured and broken. He could feel the slick, gritty texture of mud and his own cooling blood beneath his fingertips. Lying mere feet away, a mirror of his own destruction, was Sasuke. The last Uchiha was a study in stillness, his breath a shallow, almost imperceptible thing, the Sharingan and Rinnegan closed to the horrors they had wrought. Their final, cataclysmic clash, a Rasengan against a Chidori, both infused with the last dregs of their monumental power, had not declared a victor. It had simply announced their mutual annihilation. Is this it? The thought was not one of panic, but of a profound, weary resignation. Funny, after all that talk of becoming Hokage, I end up here. He tried to summon a flicker of chakra, a single spark to restart the engine of his life. But there was nothing. The wellspring was dry, the great furnace of his vitality reduced to cold ash. Kurama, the nine tails, was silent within him. The usually cantankerous, roaring presence that had been his constant companion, his burden and his greatest weapon, was a void. The great beast was fading, its own life force intrinsically tied to his, and both were circling the drain. It was in this precipice between life and oblivion that the world twisted. The rain, which had been falling with a straightforward, gravitational certainty, seemed to hesitate. A pressure descended upon the valley. A heavy, suffocating blanket that had nothing to do with the storm. It was a presence, ancient and ravenous. A figure shimmered into existence between the two fallen demigods. It was humanoid in shape but lacked any true substance, a silhouette cut from the fabric of a starless night sky, its form writhing as if made of living shadow. It radiated an energy that was anathema to the natural world. It was not chakra, the lifeblood of the shinobi. Nor was it the natural energy of the planet. It was something else, something other. A void that sought to consume. He being extended a nebulous limb towards Sasuke, its intent as clear as it was horrifying. It was a scavenger, drawn to the feast of their fading power. It sought to absorb what remained of the Uchiha's potent chakra. The divine inheritance of the Sage of Six Paths. A roar, not of sound, but of pure, unadulterated rage, echoed in the desolate landscape of Naruto's soul. He was inside himself now, standing in the vast, dying forest that had replaced the sewer of his subconscious long ago. The sky was the color of a fresh wound, and the towering trees, once symbols of his own life force, were brittle and gray. Their leaves crumbling to dust. Before him, the colossal form of Kurama was diminished. The mighty nine-tailed fox, a being of pure, catastrophic power, was translucent, its crimson fur losing its vibrancy. Its nine magnificent tails flickering like dying flames. I will not allow it. Kurama's voice, usually a force of nature, was a strained, guttural whisper that shook the very foundations of Naruto's soul. I will not let it end like this, Naruto. Not for you. Not for us. Naruto, a spectral form of his dying self, could only watch. Kurama. It's over. We have nothing left. Wrong, boy, the fox snarled. A spark of his old fire igniting in his slitted pupils. We have one thing left. We have the bond. The chains that once held me are now the links that bind us. Your lineage, the Uzumaki. You were born to be vessels. But not for a beast of hatred. You were born to house gods. Confusion warred with the encroaching emptiness in Naruto's mind. Gods. What are you talking about? There is no time. Kurama roared, shaking off his lethargy. He began to glow, a soft, internal luminescence that grew in intensity with every passing second. The stories they told you were lies, fragments of a greater truth. I am not a mere collection of chakra. I am a shard of a true divinity, shattered and sealed away. But in you, in your life force, in your unwavering will, I have found a catalyst. A way to be whole again. The light intensified, no longer a soft glow but a blinding, ferocious inferno of crimson and gold. The dying forest of Naruto's soul was set ablaze. But this was not a fire of destruction. It was a fire of purification, of transformation. This will hurt, Naruto, Kurama's voice boomed, now filled with a strange, resonant power. It will burn away the mortal. It will forge the divine. But you will live. And you will be more. On the outside, in the rain-swept valley, Naruto's body began to convulse. The shadowy entity, its limb mere inches from Sasuke's face, recoiled as a wave of unimaginable energy erupted from the blonde shinobi's seemingly lifeless form. It was a power that dwarfed anything it had ever sensed, a raw, untamed divinity that screamed into the void. A light, brilliant and pure, burst from the seal on Naruto's stomach. It was not the angry, malevolent red of the nine tails chakra he had so often wielded. This was a new color, a vibrant, living crimson shot through with veins of purest gold. The light enveloped him, and the rain that struck this divine shield sizzled into steam. His wounds, the gaping chasm in his chest, the arm that was little more than shredded meat and splintered bone, began to mend at a rate that defied all medical ninjutsu. Skin, muscle, and bone weaved themselves back into existence, not just healed, but perfected. The shadowy being shrieked, a sound that tore at the fabric of reality, and lunged, not at Sasuke, but at the epicenter of this new, terrifying power. It sought to consume this nascent god before it could fully awaken. It was a fatal mistake. As the creature's shadowy claws reached him, Naruto's eyes snapped open. They were no longer the familiar ocean blue. They were a piercing, radiant gold, glowing with an internal fire that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages and the fury of a dying star. His hair, once a sun-kissed blonde, bled into a deep, arterial crimson, growing longer, wilder, framing a face that was both his and not his. His features had sharpened, taking on a subtle, ethereal beauty, a dangerous grace. And then came the tails. From the base of his spine, not one, but 9 ethereal tails of pure crimson gold energy erupted into being. They were not physical appendages, but manifestations of his newfound power, writhing and dancing in the air like tongues of divine fire. He rose to his feet. Not with the pained struggle of a wounded man, but with a fluid, effortless grace. The world seemed to move in slow motion around him. He could see the individual raindrops hanging in the air like crystal beads. He could feel the life force of the very earth beneath his feet, the groan of the ancient stones, the silent scream of the grass. He could sense the shivering soul of the Uchiha lying on the ground, a flickering candle in a hurricane. The shadowy creature was upon him, its claws ready to rend and absorb. Naruto didn't move. He simply was. He lifted a hand, and from his palm, a small, intricate sphere of crimson gold energy spun into existence. It was not a Rasengan. It was something more. It was a miniature sun, a concentration of pure, divine essence. "Begone," he said. His voice was different. It was still his, but it was layered, resonant, carrying an echo of Kurama's guttural power and something else, something ancient and melodic. It was the voice of a king, a god, a force of nature given form and will. The sphere of energy pulsed once, and a wave of power, invisible and absolute, washed over the entity. The creature didn't even have time to shriek. Its shadowy form was unmade, its stolen energies and malevolent will simply erased from existence. It did not die. It ceased to have ever been. Naruto stood in the rain, the 9 ethereal tails swaying gently behind him, the golden light in his eyes slowly softening to a warm, steady glow. He looked at his hands, then at the now pristine state of his body. He could feel Kurama, not as a separate entity within him, but as an integral part of his very being. Their souls, their power, their consciousness had fused, creating something entirely new. He was Naruto Uzumaki. He was Kurama. He was the 9-tailed fox god, the Crimson Kitsune. He took a step, and the world blurred. It was not a flicker of movement, not a burst of speed. He was simply elsewhere. He was now kneeling beside Sasuke, his hand hovering over his rival's chest. A soft, golden light emanated from his palm, sinking into Sasuke's body, stabilizing his life force, knitting together the worst of his injuries. He could not restore the arm Sasuke had lost, not yet. He did not have the fine control, the deep understanding of this new power. But he could, and did, tether Sasuke's soul to the world of the living. It was this monumental, reality-warping surge of divine energy that acted as a beacon across dimensions. It was a lighthouse in a sea of chaos, a dinner bell for forces both curious and malevolent. The first to answer the call was not a monster. A distortion rippled in the air a dozen yards away, a shimmering tear in the fabric of the world. From it, a creature of exquisite sleekness and midnight fur padded silently into the rain-soaked valley. It was a black cat, but no ordinary feline. Its eyes were a startling, intelligent gold, and it moved with the predatory grace of a panther, its every step deliberate. Its gaze taking in the entire scene with a calculating intensity that belied its form. The cat's eyes fixed on Naruto. It saw the crimson hair, the 9 tails of energy, the lingering aura of divine power. It saw the unconscious Uchiha, the scorched earth where the shadow being had been unmade, and the subtle, lingering scent of a dimensional tear. This was Yoruichi Shihōin, the Flash Goddess. Former captain of the 2nd Division of the Gote 13, in her preferred form of infiltration and observation. She had been tasked by the Soul King to investigate the sudden, vile, and spiritual disturbances emanating from this uncharted, shinobi world, and she had followed the largest spike of energy to its source. She had expected to find a monster, a cataclysm, a natural disaster of the soul. She had not expected to find him. A voice, smooth as velvet and sharp as obsidian, echoed not in the air, but directly in Naruto's mind. It was a telepathic probe, laced with an aristocratic wit and a palpable curiosity. Well now, what have we here? I came expecting a rabid dog and instead I find a newborn lion. A rather pretty lion, at that. Naruto's head tilted. His new senses tracked the source of the voice instantly. He met the cat's golden gaze, his own eyes holding no surprise, only a calm, unwavering focus. He didn't know what this creature was, but he could feel its energy. It was spiritual, powerful, and ancient. It was a soul reaper. I'm no lion, he replied, his voice a quiet rumble that carried easily over the storm. And you're no ordinary cat. The cat seemed to smile. A faint, amused twitch of its whiskers. Perceptive. Most would have dismissed me or tried to pet me. You feel it, don't you? The energy. Raryoku. So very different from your chakra. And yet, what you are radiating now, it's neither. It's something more. Something that has no business existing in this world. Or mine. Naruto rose to his full height, the rain sluicing off his new, crimson locks. He felt no need to be aggressive. His confidence was no longer a brash, loud shield to hide his insecurities. It was a deep, quiet ocean within him, a certainty in his own power and purpose. I don't know what I am, he admitted, his honesty disarming. Not yet. But I know that I stopped something that would have destroyed us both. And I feel that you are not here to continue its work. The sheer maturity in his tone, the calm acceptance of his extraordinary circumstances, was not what Yoruichi had anticipated from the source of such a violent, chaotic energy burst. This was no mindless beast. This was a being of immense power, possessed of an equally immense control. And that, to a connoisseur of power like Yoruichi, was infinitely more intriguing. The cat took a few more silent steps forward, circling him. Its golden eyes appraising every inch of his transformed state. The 9 tails of energy swirled around him, a silent, mesmerizing dance. You are a curiosity, Naruto Uzumaki. The voice echoed in his mind again, using his name with a familiarity that should have been startling, but somehow wasn't. She had plucked it from the surface of his thoughts as easily as one might pick a fruit from a tree. A beautiful, dangerous, and utterly fascinating anomaly. And anomalies have a way of attracting attention. Not all of it as discerning as myself. A beat of silence passed between them. A moment of understanding in the heart of the storm. He was a new piece on a board he didn't know existed, and she was the first player to find him. With a final, appraising look. The cat stopped directly in front of him. There was a faint shimmer, a soft pop of displaced air, and where the feline had been, a woman now stood. She was tall, dark-skinned, with striking violet hair and a body that spoke of nothing but power, speed, and honed perfection. She was completely, unashamedly nude, the rain tracing silver paths down her athletic form. Her golden eyes, the same as the cat's, held a dangerous, playful glint. She smirked, a slow, deliberate curve of her lips that was both a challenge and an invitation. It seems the world has just become infinitely more interesting, she said, her voice now a low, husky purr in the open air. You have a lot of explaining to do, pretty boy. And so do I. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Echoes and Overtures. The world, for a long moment, was held in the amber of a silent, mutual appraisal. The rain continued its relentless assault, a percussive drumming on stone and water that seemed to form the very rhythm of this new, impossible reality. Yoruichi Shihōin stood before him, a creature of sculpted midnight and dangerous grace, her unabashed nudity a testament to a confidence so absolute it transcended mortal concepts of modesty. It was a power play, a psychological gambit, and a simple statement of fact. She was a being for whom clothing was a tactical choice, not a necessity. Naruto met her gaze, his own golden eyes, a placid sea against her predatory storm. The part of him that was still the boisterous, easily flustered knucklehead shinobi of Konoha noted her state of dress, filed it away as surprising, and was promptly subsumed by the vast, calm consciousness that now defined him. The fusion with Kurama had not just granted him power, it had bestowed upon him an ocean of experience, the ancient, weary wisdom of a being who had witnessed the birth and death of nations. He saw her not as a naked woman, but as a coalescence of immense spiritual energy, a wielder of speed so profound it could bend space, and an intellect as sharp and polished as a surgeon's blade. Interesting is one word for it, Naruto replied, his voice a low counterpoint to the storm. The layered resonance was still there, a harmony of his own soul and Kurama's ancient power. But I find myself short on time for witty banter. So, you'll forgive me if I'm direct. Who are you? Where do you come from? And what do you want here? Yoruichi's smirk widened. His reaction, or lack thereof, was precisely what she hadn't expected. No blush, no stammering, no averted eyes. Just a calm, direct, and utterly focused assessment. This being in front of her wore the face of a boy who looked no older than 17, but his eyes held the weight of centuries. Direct. I can appreciate that, she purred, taking a fluid step closer. The weight. Our droplets that clung to her dark skin seemed to trace the lines of her athletic physique, each one a tiny lens magnifying her perfection. The name is Yoruichi Shihōin. As for where I come from, let's call it a place where souls go to work. The Soul Society. She paused, letting the name hang in the air, watching him for any sign of comprehension. There was none, only patient waiting. And what I want, she continued, circling him now with the silent, predatory grace of the panther she had once been, is to understand what in the name of the Soul King you are. One moment, this world is a little backwater on the dimensional charts, barely registering. The next, a surge of energy so potent, so utterly unique, erupts from it like a supernova. It wasn't the raw power that was so shocking, pretty boy. We've seen power. It was the nature of it. It's not Raryoku, the spiritual power of my people. It's not the chaotic, hungry energy of a hollow. And it's certainly not the simple chakra. I can feel clinging to this world like a thin coat of paint. What you unleashed was something divine. Something that screamed, I am here, to anyone, or anything, that was listening. Her golden eyes met his again. A silent fire in their depths. And believe me, many things were listening. I just happened to be the closest and the fastest. So, I'll return your directness with my own. What are you? Naruto considered her words, the new terminology sliding into his understanding with an effortless clarity. Soul Society. Raryoku. Hollow. These were concepts his old self would have struggled with. But his new consciousness processed them, categorized them, and cross-referenced them with the silence where his own world's knowledge should be. He had no answers for these new terms, only the context she provided. I was a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village, he began, his voice steady. He gestured to the broken valley, to the still form of his rival. We fought a great war. We won. Then, he and I had one last disagreement. We were dying. Both of us. The being of immense chakra sealed within me, the nine-tailed fox, Kurama, he performed some kind of fusion. A last resort. He spoke of his true nature, not as a beast of chakra, but as a shard of a divinity. He used my Uzumaki life force as a catalyst to reforge himself. To reforge us. He held up a hand, watching the crimson gold energy swirl around his fingers. The 9 ethereal tails behind him swayed in a non-existent breeze, their light a beacon in the storm's gloom. What I am now is the result of that union. I am Naruto Uzumaki. I am Kurama. And together, we are something new. I do not have a name for it yet. Yoruichi stopped circling, her expression a mixture of fascination and profound disbelief. A Biju. A divinity. She had read the scant intelligence reports on this world, the way they manipulated this chakra, by sealing great beasts within themselves. To the Shinigami, it was a primitive, brutish form of power management. But if what he said was true, if this, Kurama, was a fragment of a true god, and it had fused perfectly with a mortal soul, then he wasn't just an anomaly. He was a singularity. A 1-0 kind existence that broke every known law of spiritual and physical reality. A fusion, she mused, tapping a finger to her chin. Unheard of. The Gote 13 would have a field day with you. The Department of Research and Development would want to put you under a microscope for 1,000 years. And Central 46 would probably just order your immediate execution as a threat to the balance. Then, it's a good thing I have no intention of visiting, Naruto stated calmly. He took a step towards Sasuke, his attention drawn back to the urgent matter of his friend's fading life. Your world, your rules. This is my world. And my priority is here. Before Yoruichi could respond, Naruto's head snapped up, his golden eyes narrowing as he stared at a point in the empty, rain-filled air 20 yards away. His divine senses, an intricate web of awareness that extended far beyond sight and sound, had detected a new vibration. It was a subtle, precise cutting of the world's fabric, like a scalpel slicing through silk. There was no raw power, no dimensional tear, just a quiet, clean displacement. Company, he said, his voice a low warning. Yoruichi's playful demeanor vanished, replaced by the hun-ed instincts of a captain-class Shinigami. She followed his gaze, her own spiritual senses flaring. She could feel it too, now that he had pointed it out. A presence, cold and ancient, coalescing with unnerving speed. The air shimmered, not with a tear, but with a perfect, silent fold. Reality bent back upon itself, and from this geometric impossibility, a figure emerged. It was a woman, tall and regal. Her posture as straight and unyielding as the crystalline staff she held in one hand. She was clad in robes of deep indigo, woven with threads that seemed to drink the light, embroidered with sea constellations that slowly shifted and realigned. Her hair was the color of spun silver, braided in an intricate pattern that fell to her waist. Her face was a mask of aristocratic beauty, all high cheekbones and pale skin, but her eyes, the color of a winter sky, held no warmth. They were the eyes of a scientist, an academic, filled with a piercing, analytical intelligence that sought not to connect, but to dissect. This was Archmage Alara of the Argent Spire, a mistress of the arcane arts from a realm where magic was not a mystical force, but the fundamental physics of the universe. She had racked the anomaly not as a spiritual disturbance, but as a violent, paradoxical equation that had momentarily screamed its impossibility across the ether, the magical substrate that connected all things in her cosmology. Alara's cold gaze swept the scene, cataloging the details with inhuman precision. She noted the shattered statues, the unconscious Uchiha with his strange, dormant energy patterns, the woman of dark skin and immense contained speed. And then, her eyes locked onto Naruto. Her lips, a thin, pale line, parted slightly. Inconceivable, she breathed, her voice crisp and formal, carrying an accent that was sharp and precise, like the chipping of ice. The energy signature is stable. It is not a chaotic eruption, but a self-sustaining paradox. Its very existence violates the first law of taumaturgical dynamics. It is creating existential inertia from nothing. She took a step forward, her indigo robes making no sound on the wet stone. She paid Yoruichi no more heed than one would a guard dog. Her entire focus on the crimson-haired demigod. She raised her free hand, her fingers tracing a complex, glowing blue sigil in the air. Specimen designation. Anomaly 0. I must acquire a sample. Do not resist. It will be unpleasant if you do. A diagnostic spell, a harmless but incredibly invasive probe designed to unravel a being's magical and biological structure, shot from her fingertips. It was faster than any shuriken, a bolt of pure, analytical magic. Yoruichi's eyes widened. She was about to move, to intercept the spell with her own body if necessary, a blur O.F. motion that would be her signature shunpo. But she was too slow. Or rather, Naruto was too fast. He didn't move. He didn't even flinch. He simply raised his own hand, palm open. The bolt of blue energy struck it and dissolved. It did not explode. It was not deflected. It was simply unwritten from reality, his crimson gold aura consuming the intricate magical formula like a flame consuming a snowflake. Silence. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. Alara's cold, analytical eyes betrayed the faintest flicker of shock. It was a micro-expression, gone in an instant, but it was there. That SPL was woven from the pure fabric of the ether. It was not something that could be blocked by a simple energy shield. To negate it, one would have to understand its complex, multi-layered structure. And deconstruct it in the nanosecond before impact. Or, one would have to possess an energy so fundamentally dominant that it simply overwrote the laws of magic itself. I am not a specimen, Naruto said, his voice deceptively soft. Yet it cut through the sound of the storm like a razor. And I will not be sampled. State your name and your purpose, or leave this place. Yoruichi let out a low whistle, a grin returning to her face. The new kid was full of surprises. He hadn't just stopped a spell, he had issued a command from a position of absolute power. You dare. Alara's voice was laced wit. The indignant fury of an academic whose life's work had just been casually contradicted. I am Archmage Alara, and my purpose is the acquisition of knowledge. You, phenomenon, are the greatest discovery in a millennium. You are a walking, breathing violation of reality. To not study you would be the greatest of sins. She raised her crystalline staff, and the air around her grew heavy, humming with a pressure that made the teeth ache. The very atmosphere was being saturated with raw, untamed magical energy. I will not ask again. Submit to analysis. I'd think twice about that, lady, Yoruichi purred, her body tensing. Every muscle coiled and ready to spring. She shifted into a low crouch, her Raryoku flaring to life, a golden aura of spiritual pressure that pushed back against the mage's oppressive power. He's with me. And I don't like people touching my things. Alara's gaze shifted to Yoruichi, a look of pure, unadulterated disdain on her face. You reek of death and stagnation, spirit walker. Your power is a crude, blunt instrument. Do not interfere in the matters of your betters. The insult hung in the air, a declaration of war. Yoruichi's grin became a feral snarl. Oh, you did not just say that to me. The battle was about to begin. A clash between two beings of immense power from two entirely different realities. The Mistress of Flash Step versus the Archmage of the Argent Spire. Speed versus overwhelming arcane force. And then, neither of them could move. A pressure, gentle as a lover's touch yet as absolute as gravity, descended upon them both. It did not crush them. It did not harm them. It simply held them. Yoruichi found her muscles refusing the command to spring. Alara found the ether around her refusing to coalesce, her connection to the weave of magic suddenly and completely severed. Between them, Naruto had taken a single step forward. The 9 tails of energy behind him flared, and a translucent wall of shimmering crimson gold light now separated the two women. It was this barrier that emanated the gentle, irresistible pressure. He had stopped them both, without effort, without aggression. It was the simple, undeniable authority of a god quieting two squabbling children. Enough, he commanded, his voice now devoid of any softness. It was the voice of the Kyuubi, the voice of a king, the voice of a natural disaster given purpose. Both of you, stand down. He looked first at Yoruichi, his golden eyes holding a hint of appreciation. I can fight my own battles, Yoruichi Shihōin. But I thank you for the sentiment. Then, he turned his gaze to Alara. And the Archmage felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. For the first time in her long life, she felt like the specimen under the microscope. Archmage Alara, he said, the title sounding almost like a mockery on his lips. You speak of knowledge, but you act with the ignorance of a child burning an ancient scroll because she cannot read its language. You cannot die a phenomenon by attempting to destroy it. And you cannot demand cooperation with threats. He lowered his hand, and the barrier of light dissolved. The pressure vanished. Yoruichi and Alara could move again, but neither did. They were both staring at him, their expressions a complex mixture of shock, fury, and a dawning, grudging respect. He had taken control of the situation completely. Not through brute force or empty boasting, but through a calm, decisive display of superior power and unshakable will. Now, Naruto continued, his tone softening slightly, returning to one of calm reason. A being of shadows tried to consume my friend's soul moments before you both arrived. I unmade it. Yoruichi tells me my own transformation has sent a ripple across dimensions, and that more will be coming. We can stand here and fight amongst ourselves, wasting our strength until the next, possibly less reasonable, visitor arrives. Or, we can find shelter, share what we know, and form a temporary truce. The choice seems obvious to me. Quote, he turned his back on them both, a move of such supreme confidence that it left them momentarily speechless, and knelt once more beside Sasuke. It was clear who was in charge. Yoruichi was the first to break the silence. She let out a long, slow breath, her body relaxing from its combat stance. The feral grin returned to her face, but this time it was different. It was filled with a genuine, dangerous excitement. This was far more interesting than she could have possibly imagined. Shelter sounds good, she said, her voice laced with amusement. This rain is starting to get boring. Alara remained silent for a few moments longer, her mind racing, processing the events of the last few minutes. Her pride was screaming. She had been neutralized, effortlessly, by a being who should not exist. Her entire understanding of the cosmos had been challenged. But, he was right. His logic was undeniable, and the opportunity to observe him, to speak with him, to perhaps even understand him, it was a prize beyond measure. A truce, she conceded, her voice stiff and formal, is a logical course of action. Under the circumstances, Naruto nodded without looking back at them. His attention was on Sasuke, but his senses were spread throughout the valley. He could feel their acquiescence, their reluctant alliance. He reached out with his own energy, not the raw, untamed power of the Biju, but a new, gentler aspect of his divine nature. He felt the life in the stone, the water, the earth. He felt the rhythm of the world around him. And he found what he was looking for. This way, he said, rising to his feet. With a flick of his wrist, a bubble of his crimson gold energy enveloped Sasuke's unconscious form, lifting him gently from the mud. Behind the waterfall, there's a cave. It will be dry. He began to walk, Sasuke's levitating body floating silently behind him. He didn't look back to see if they were following. He knew they were. The Shinigami and the Archmage, two of the most powerful women from their respective worlds, now followed in the wake of a newborn god, the storm-swept valley their first, unlikely meeting place. The cave was exactly as he had sensed it, a deep, dry cavern hidden behind the roaring curtain of the waterfall. The sound of the deluge was a constant, muffled thunder, creating a sense of isolation from the world outside. The air within was cool and smelled of damp earth and ancient stone. With a gesture, Naruto created a few floating spheres of soft, golden light that drifted towards the ceiling, illuminating the space with a warm, steady glow. He gently lowered Sasuke into a dry alcove, ensuring his friend was comfortable before turning to face his two new associates. Yoruichi entered with her usual fluid grace, shaking her head like a cat to send a spray of water from her violet hair. She immediately found a high ledge and leapt onto it, settling into a cross-legged position from where she could observe the entire cave. Alara entered more cautiously, her staff held at the ready, her analytical eyes scanning every rock formation, her senses probing for any magical traps or wards. Satisfied there were none, she stood near the entrance, a pillar of regal disapproval, the water on her enchanted robes evaporating into a faint mist. All right, pretty boy, Yoruichi began, breaking the silence. You have our attention. You wanted to talk. So, talk. Let's start with what you know, which I'm guessing is about as much as we do. Naruto nodded, taking a seat on a smooth, flat rock in the center of the cavern. The 9 tails of energy behind him coalesced into 3 larger, more defined tails that rested on the ground around him, their light providing a soft, crimson counterpoint to the golden spheres above. You're right. I know very little, he admitted, his honesty a stark contrast to the immense power he wielded. I know my world, chakra, jutsu, the history of the shinobi. And I know what Kurama told me in our final moments. But of other worlds, of soul reapers and magic, I am ignorant. So, let's exchange that knowledge. I will tell you everything about this world, and you will tell me of yours. And so, the strange council began. In a hidden cave in a world of ninjas, a divine fusion, a soul reaper captain, and a master archmage began to lay the foundations of a new understanding. Naruto spoke of the sage of the 6 paths, of the tailed beasts, of the elemental nations, and the cycle of hatred that had plagued his people for generations. He explained the principles of chakra, how it was molded from spiritual and physical energy, a concept that seemed to fascinate Alara and amuse Yoruichi with its biological limitations. In turn, Yoruichi explained the Gote 13, the structure of the soul society, and the flow of souls from the world of the living to the afterlife. She spoke of Zanpakuto, the soul-cutting swords that were extensions of a Shinigami's own soul, and of hollows, the corrupted, monstrous souls that fed on others. Alara listened to this with detached interest, classifying it as a form of applied necromancy and spiritual manipulation. Then, Alara spoke. Her explanation of the ether was a lecture in arcane physics. She described magic not as a mystical art, but as a fundamental force of the universe, governed by immutable laws and complex equations. She spoke of planes of existence, of elemental attunement, of the difference between raw power and the elegant, precise application of will to reshape reality. To her, Yoruichi's Raryoku was a fascinating but chaotic form of kinetic spiritual energy, while Naruto's chakra was a diluted, internalized form of biomancy. As they spoke, a strange sort of respect began to form between the two women. Yoruichi's sharp, practical mind could see the terrifying potential of Alara's systematic magic. Alara, in turn, could not deny the sheer, terrifying efficiency of Yoruichi's mastery over her own spiritual form. They were opposites, but they were both masters of their craft. Throughout it all, Naruto listened. He absorbed the information, his new mind processing the vast, complex cosmologies with an ease that would have been impossible before. He saw the connections, the overlaps, the places where their realities might intersect. And he saw the dangers. Each of their worlds had its own rules, its own hierarchies, its own threats. And he was now a rogue element, a player who belonged to no side, a power that could destabilize them all. While Alara was explaining the theoretical impossibility of his divine fusion, Naruto's focus drifted. He closed his eyes, turning his senses inward, towards the still form of Sasuke. He reached out with his own consciousness, a gentle probe of golden energy, and for the first time, he touched his friend's mind. He was met with a storm of darkness, a maelstrom of hatred, loneliness, and a pain so profound it was a physical thing. He saw flashes of the Uchiha massacre, of Itachi's tear-streaked face, of his own desperate pleas and their bloody, repeated clashes. But underneath it all, beneath the layers of rage and vengeance, he felt something else. A flicker of light, a deep, bone-deep weariness, and a sliver of regret. The faintest echo of the bond they once shared. Naruto didn't try to fight the darkness. He didn't try to heal it. He simply shared his own light. He projected a feeling of calm, of acceptance, of a forgiveness that asked for nothing in return. He showed Sasuke a glimpse of his own new reality, the fusion with Kurama, the quiet strength that came not from power, but from understanding. And in that moment of connection, his mind was thrown into a vision. It was not a memory. It was a premonition. He saw not just one world, but a tapestry of them, strung together like jewels on a cosmic thread. He saw the gleaming, sterile halls of the Soul Society. He saw the impossible, floating towers of Alara's Argent Spire. And he saw other places. A world of gleaming chrome and neon-drenched rain, where humans had replaced their flesh with steel. A world of sprawling, organic jungles where colossal beasts roamed. He saw threats converging, drawn by the light of his awakening. Monstrous, masked hollows of a size and power Yoruichi had never described. Eldritch beings of pure magic that would make Alara seem like a novice. Shadowy syndicates from the Chrome world, viewing him as the ultimate biological weapon. He was a beacon. And the moths, both beautiful and monstrous, were beginning to flock to his flame. He was pulled from the vision by a new sound. One that did not belong in this world of stone and water. It was a low, rhythmic humming, an electronic thrum that vibrated in the very air. Naruto's eyes snapped open. Up there, he said. His voice sharp with urgency. Yoruichi and Alara were on their feet in an instant, their truce forgotten in the face of a new potential threat. They followed his gaze towards the cave entrance. Hovering silently in the stormy sky, just beyond the curtain of the waterfall, was a craft that defied all logic for this world. It was small, sleek, and painted a matte, non-reflective black. It had no wings, no rotors, yet it hung in the air with perfect stability, its advanced gravitic engines producing the low, alien hum. It was a machine of war, a piece of technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. A hatch hissed open on its underbelly, and a figure descended on a shimmering grav line. The person landed at the mouth of the cave with a soft thud of armored boots on stone. The grav line detaching and retracting in an instant. It was another woman. She was encased in form-fitting, carbon nanowave tactical gear, every inch of her designed for combat efficiency. A sleek helmet covered her head, its visor a plate of opaque black glass, but it retracted with a soft hiss, revealing a face that was sharp, angular, and framed by short-cropped, crimson hair. That was a startlingly similar shade to Naruto's own. Her eyes, however, were not warm gold, but a cold, calculating blue, glowing with the faint light of cybernetic augmentation. In her hands, she held a plasma rifle, its coils glowing with a contained, lethal energy. She was Valeria Val Rostova, callsign, Kestrel, formerly of the Velez Sector Spetsnaz. A soldier from a future where humanit Y had traded its soul for scientific advancement. Her quantum sensors had picked up the dimensional fracture and the unique energy signature a quadrant away, and she had been dispatched to investigate, and if necessary, neutralize the source. Her cybernetic eyes scanned the cave's occupants, her internal processors analyzing their energy signatures in a flood of data. Target 1. Female. High spiritual energy output. Class 7 kinetic potential. Threat level. High. Target 2. Female. High exotic energy output. Suspected reality warping capabilities. Threat level. Critical. Target 3. Male. Source of primary event. Energy signature. Unclassifiable. Off the scale. God-like particle emissions. Threat level. Absolute. Her plasma rifle hummed as she raised it, the weapon's muzzle settling unerringly on Naruto's chest. Her voice, when she spoke, was clipped, professional, and filtered through a subtle vocal synthesizer, devoid of any emotion. Subject 0. By the authority of the Velez Corporation mandate, you will cease all energy emissions and surrender for containment and analysis. Non-compliance will be met with overwhelming force. The Shinigami. The Archmage. And now, the cyborg. Naruto looked at the barrel of the advanced weapon pointed at him, then at the soldier wielding it. He didn't stand. He didn't raise a hand. He simply met her gaze, a faint, almost sad smile touching his lips. I'm afraid, he said. His voice calm amidst the impossible standoff, that I'm going to have to decline. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Unwilling Symphony. The air in the cavern, already thick with the scent of rain and ancient stone, grew taut enough to snap. It was a tableau of impossible forces, a standoff between epochs. Yoruichi, poised on her ledge, was a coiled spring of spiritual power. Her playful demeanor momentarily sheathed to reveal the sharp edges of a predator. Alara stood like a statue carved from winter ice, the ether around her thrumming with silent, destructive potential. Her intellect coldly calculating kill probabilities. And at the mouth of the cave stood Valeria, a ghost from a future of steel and light, her plasma rifle a single, unwavering point of lethal intent aimed directly at Naruto's heart. The low hum of the weapon was the only sound that challenged the muffled roar of the waterfall. It was a sound that promised swift, thermal disassembly. Alaria's cybernetic eyes glowed with a faint blue light, processing terabytes of data, her entire being focused on the single directive: contain the anomaly. Naruto did not move from his seated position on the rock. The three tails of crimson gold energy swaying behind him did not even flicker. He simply looked down the barrel of the futuristic weapon, his expression not of fear or anger, but of a deep, profound weariness. He had just finished one war. He had no desire to begin three more. Overwhelming force, Naruto repeated, his voice a calm resonance in the tense silence. That is the ants. Your Velez Corporation has for things it doesn't understand. To shoot them. Understanding is a secondary objective, Valeria's synthesized voice replied, devoid of inflection. Containment of potential threats to pan-dimensional stability is the primary mandate. Your energy signature has already caused multiple reality fissures. You are, by definition, a threat. So, you're the dimensional police. Yoruichi chimed in from her perch, her tone dripping with amused contempt. Your jurisdiction doesn't extend here, tin soldier. I arrived first. By right of salvage, he's my problem. Your claim is irrelevant, Alara stated. Her voice cutting through the air, sharp and cold. She had not lowered her crystalline staff. This being is a cosmological paradox. He belongs to the realm of arcane science. Not the brutish purviews of soul reapers or trigger-happy automatons. His disposition falls to me. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on Naruto. They were arguing over him like three scholars over a rare fossil. Each convinced their discipline held the sole right of study. And Valeria, the most direct of the three, was ready to end the argument by shattering the fossil into dust. You see, Naruto said, his golden eyes sweeping over all three of them, this is the problem. You all see me as a thing. A prize, a threat, a specimen. You haven't once considered asking me what I want. Your desires are not a variable in this equation, subject zero, Valeria stated flatly. The coils on her rifle glowed brighter. Naruto sighed. It was a sound that seemed to carry the weight of ages. So be it. He lifted his right hand, palm open, not in a sign of aggression, but in a simple, placating gesture. Let's all just take a breath. What happened next was not a burst of speed or a surge of power. It was something far more subtle and infinitely more terrifying to the three women. Valeria's plasma rifle simply went dead. The lethal hum ceased. The glowing coils faded to a dull, inert gray. A string of red error messages flashed across her internal heads-up display. Weapon system offline. Power cell. Inert. Energy drain. Unknown source. It was as if the very concept of stored energy had been politely but firmly requested to leave the advanced power cell. Her finger tightened on the trigger, a useless, reflexive action. The machine in her hands was now just a piece of sculpted metal and plastic. Simultaneously, Alara felt the ether around her turn to static. Her connection to the fundamental forces of her reality, a link she had spent centuries honing, was gone. It wasn't blocked or suppressed. It felt as if the very air had become magically inert, a dead zone where the laws of thaumaturgy no longer applied. Her staff, a potent artifact capable of leveling cities, felt like a simple glass stick in her hand. Her mind, a fortress of arcane knowledge, reeled from the sudden, deafening silence. On her ledge, Yoruichi felt a strange lethargy settle over her. Her Raryoku, the spiritual energy she commanded as easily as breathing, was still there, but it felt sluggish. The thought of using Shunpo, of moving at the godlike speeds she was famous for, seemed like an insurmountable effort, like trying to run through waist-deep molasses. She was still powerful, still a captain-class Shinigami, but her defining edge, her impossible swiftness, had been muted. All three of them stared at Naruto. He hadn't moved. His hand was still raised in that gentle, open gesture. His expression was still one of sad resignation. He had neutralized all three of them, their greatest strengths, their defining abilities, without a single aggressive act. He hadn't overpowered them. He had simply turned them off. I have no wish to harm any of you, he said. His voice quiet but carrying an absolute authority that resonated in the now powerless cavern. I am not your enemy. I am not a prize to be won or a specimen to be collected. I am a living being who is tired of fighting. I am asking you, one last time, to stand down. He lowered his hand, and just as suddenly as it had vanished, their power returned. Valeria's rifle hummed back to life, its coils glowing with renewed energy. Alara felt the sweet, familiar song of the ether rush back into her senses. Yoruichi felt the coiled spring of her shunpo retighten, ready to be unleashed. But none of them moved to attack. They couldn't. The demonstration had been too absolute, too profound. He hadn't just shown them he was stronger, he had shown them that their very definitions of strength were irrelevant in his presence. He could grant and revoke their power at will. It was the difference between a swordsman and the blacksmith who forged all swords. Valeria slowly, deliberately, lowered her plasma rifle. Her internal processors were struggling, caught in a logic loop. Her mandate was to contain the threat. But the threat had demonstrated that containment was impossible. The only logical course of action was to re-evaluate. To gather more data. New directive, she stated, her synthesized voice betraying a hint of something that might have been mechanical surprise. Observe and report. Hostile engagement protocols suspended. Quote. Alara, for her part, was experiencing an emotion she hadn't felt since she was a young acolyte. Awe. Pure, unadulterated awe. He hadn't used a counter spell or an anti-magic field. He had imposed his will upon the very fabric of magic itself, a feat that was, according to every text she had ever read, the exclusive domain of a true creator deity. Her desire to dissect him was being rapidly replaced by a fervent, almost religious desire to learn from him. Yoruichi let out a low, throaty chuckle, breaking the tension. She hopped down from her ledge, landing silently on the cave floor. The predatory grin was back, but now it was aimed at a peer, not a target. Well, damn, pretty boy, she purred, stretching her arms above her head, the movement a symphony of fluid muscle. When you decide to make a point, you don't fool around. All right, you win. No more fighting. For now. So, what's your master plan? Because sitting in this damp cave while more of, whatever they are. She gestured vaguely towards Alara and Valeria, show up, doesn't seem very productive. Naruto was about to answer when his head snapped to the side, his golden eyes fixing on the dark alcove where Sasuke lay. The calm, authoritative aura around him was shattered, replaced by a sudden, sharp spike of alarm. Something's wrong, he said, his voice a low growl. It started as a flicker. A distortion in the shadows clinging to the corner of the cavern. It was not a grand, reality-tearing entrance like Yoruichi's, nor a precise, surgical fold like Alara's. This was a silent, greasy seep. A stain spreading through the world's fabric. None of their senses had detected it. Valeria's quantum sensors registered nothing. Alara's arcane wards remained untripped. Yoruichi's spiritual awareness was silent. It was a thing that existed in the gaps between their realities, a creature of the void. A pool of absolute, non-reflective blackness coalesced on the stone floor next to Sasuke. It was a hole in the world. A patch of anti-existence. From this pool, a tendril of the same shadow stuff, thin and whip-like, lashed out. It did not aim for Naruto, the brilliant son of divine energy. It aimed for the flickering candle of Sasuke's life force. It was a void leech, a scavenger of dimensions, drawn not to raw power, but to the delicious, complex energies of a soul in turmoil, a life hanging in the balance. No, Naruto roared. He moved, a blur of crimson and gold, but the tendril was impossibly fast, its movement governed by a geometry that was not their own. It struck Sasuke's chest, not piercing flesh, but phasing through it, latching onto the Uchiha's very soul. Sasuke's body arched in a silent scream, his face contorted in an agony that transcended physical pain. The faint, flickering light of his life force began to drain away, siphoned into the black tendril, feeding the growing pool of darkness. The void leech, now anchored and feeding, began to pull its full form through the dimensional seep. It was a horror of non-Euclidean design. A central mass of writhing, shadowy tentacles, each one ending in a grasping, multi-jointed claw. It had no face, no eyes. Only a pulsating core that radiated an aura of profound, soul-crushing emptiness. It was the universe's answer to the question of what lies between the stars. Not nothing, but a hungry, silent predator. What is that thing? Yoruichi snarled, her Raryoku flaring, all playfulness gone. Etheric signature is null. It's not magical, Alara announced, her staff already glowing with a combat-ready light. It appears to be a parasitic entity from a null plane. Life signs negative, Valeria reported, her rifle already aimed, her combat protocols re-engaged. But it's drawing massive amounts of B. I.O. spiritual energy from the secondary target. Recommending immediate termination. Naruto was already there, his hand reaching for the tendril latched onto Sasuke. But as his fingers, glowing with divine energy, made contact, the shadow stuff recoiled violently, letting out a psychic shriek that echoed in all their minds. The energy of his divinity was anathema to it, a poison. But the brief contact sent a jolt of vile, negative energy coursing up Naruto's arm, a feeling of absolute despair and cosmic loneliness that would have shattered a lesser mind. He recoiled, not from pain, but from the sheer, soul-deep violation. The leech, its meal interrupted, now recognized the greater threat. The central mass shuddered, and a dozen more tendrils, thick as pythons, erupted from its form, lashing out at everyone in the cavern. Scatter! Naruto commanded, his voice booming with the Nine Tails' fury. The unwilling symphony began. Yoruichi was a flicker of motion, a black and violet blur that danced between the shadowy whips. The tendrils were fast, but her shunpo was faster. She weaved through the chaotic assault, her hands glowing with the pale blue light of her Hakuda. She struck the Mai-en body of the leech with a powerful palm heel strike. The impact made a sickening, wet thud, but the creature's body simply absorbed the force, rippling like thick tar. Her physical blows were useless. It's got no solid matter. She yelled, flipping backward to avoid a sweeping attack. Argent barrier. Alara's voice was a sharp, clear command. A wall of shimmering, crystalline blue force erupted in front of her and Valeria. Just as three tendrils slammed into it. The barrier held, but spiderweb cracks appeared on its surface, the void energy of the leech corroding the pure magic of the shield. The barrier won't hold for long. Its energy has a corrosive, anti-taumaturgic property. Alara called out, her mind racing. Standard offensive spells would likely be just as ineffective as Yoruichi's physical attacks. She needed something more fundamental. Valeria, behind the cracking shield, adjusted her rifle's output. If thermal energy was ineffective, she would try kinetic. The humming of the weapon changed to a high-pitched whine as she switched to mass driver rounds. She fired a 3-round burst. The projectiles, small pellets of hyper-dense matter, left the barrel at near light speed. They struck the leech's body and were swallowed by it. No impact, no damage. They simply vanished into its shadowy mass. Negative effect from kinetic munitions, she reported, her calm, synthesized voice a stark contrast to the chaos. Switching to sonic frequencies. Attempting to find a resonant frequency to disrupt its cohesion. Naruto saw it all in a flash. Physical attacks were useless. Energy attacks were absorbed. His own divine power was a poison to it, but he couldn't get close without risking that soul-crushing feedback, and he couldn't risk a wide-area attack with Sasuke so close to the creature. This thing wasn't a warrior. It was a scavenger, a parasite. It wasn't designed to fight. It was designed to consume. And that meant it had to have a weakness. They just weren't thinking on the right level. It's not from any of our realities. He yelled, his voice cutting through the din of combat. He created a Rasengan in his palm, the familiar blue sphere of spiraling chakra. But then he infused it with his new power. The blue was consumed by a vortex of crimson and gold, the sound changing from a high-pitched whir to a low, powerful hum, like a miniature star. A Kitsune by Rasengan. We have to hit it with everything at once. Overwhelm its ability to adapt and absorb. Yoruichi, I need a distraction, close range. Alara, bind it. Don't try to hurt it. Just hold it in place. Valeria, give me a target. The orders were sharp, precise, and delivered with an unshakable confidence that cut through their individual pride and training. For a split second, each woman's instinct was to reject the command. To rely on her own superior knowledge. But his logic was sound, and in the heat of battle, a good plan was better than 3 separate, failing strategies. Yoruichi grinned, a flash of feral delight. A distraction. Pretty boy. That's my middle name. Her spiritual pressure skyrocketed. Shunko. An eruption of pressurized Kido flared to life around her back and arms, tearing the back of her Shihakusho to shreds. She was wreathed in a vortex of swirling, concentrated Raryoku, her power level increasing exponentially. She didn't attack the creature's body. Instead, she moved, a bolt of lightning, and began striking the stone floor around the void leech. Each impact sent a shockwave of force and a shower of razor-sharp stone shards peppering the creature's form. It was annoying, painful. 1,000 tiny cuts from a reality it couldn't absorb. The leech, irritated, diverted half of its tendrils to swat the infuriating, fast-moving gnat that was Yoruichi Shihōin. Alara seized the opening. Her pride stung at taking orders from the anomaly, but his strategy was tactically sound. She wouldn't try to damage it with magic. She would impose magic upon it. Gravimetric lattice of the fourth seal. She incanted, her staff slamming onto the cavern floor. A web of brilliant, silver lines of force erupted from the ground, wrapping around the void leech's central mass. It wasn't an attack. It was a cage of pure, physical law. The creature strained against the lattice, its form distorting as the crushing weight of amplified gravity sought to hold it in place. The silver lines smoked and hissed as the leech's void energy corroded them, but they held. The lattice will fail in less than 10 seconds. Alara grunted, sweat beading on her brow from the effort. Valeria's rifle was no longer aimed at the creature. It was pointed at the ground, its underside emitting a series of high-frequency pulses. Her cybernetic eyes glowed as data streamed across her vision. "I have it," she yelled, her synthesized voice sharp with discovery. The creature has no biological components, but its dimensional anchor, the point from which it's drawing its mass, has a resonant frequency. It's unstable. I'm projecting the location now. It's inside the central mass, a point of absolute null energy. A red, shimmering targeting reticle appeared in the air, projected from her helmet. Hovering deep within the void leech's writhing body. That was all Naruto needed. "I'm going in," he yelled. The 9 tails behind him blazed with the light of a nova. He crouched, his body crackling with crimson gold lightning. "Wait, you can't touch it," Yoruichi yelled, dodging a flailing tendril. "I don't have to." He shot forward, not with a simple burst of speed, but with a movement that was part shunpo, part body flicker, and part something entirely new. He was an avatar of divine force, a crimson comet. He didn't run towards the void leech. He ran at it. The remaining tendrils lashed out to intercept him. But Naruto didn't dodge. Instead, he extended his left arm, and from it, 5 chakra chains, glowing with the golden light of his mother's adamantine sealing chains, erupted. But these were different. They were infused with his new divinity, making them stronger, faster, absolute. The chains met the tendrils, not blocking them, but wrapping around them, binding them. The divine energy causing the shadowy appendages to smoke and recoil in agony. He was inside their guard. The Kitsunbai Rasengan in his right hand pulsed, a contained sun of furious energy. He thrust it forward, aiming directly for Valeria's shimmering red target. He did not touch the leech's body. Just before impact, he released the sphere of energy, letting it fly the last few inches on its own. The Kitsunbai Rasengan plunged into the void leech's shadowy form. For a moment, there was no sound. No explosion. The crimson gold sphere simply vanished into the blackness. The leech froze, held in Alara's failing lattice. Then, the light came. It started from the inside, a sickening, beautiful crimson gold glow that illuminated the creature's form from within, revealing a chaotic, swirling vortex of non-existence at its core. Naruto's divine energy was not just attacking it, it was purifying it. It was a fundamental rewriting of reality, an injection of existence into a creature of the void. The void leech let out one final, silent, psychic scream that clawed at the edges of their sanity. Its body began to dissolve, not burning or exploding, but flaking away like ash on the wind. Each particle of its shadow stuff turning into motes of harmless, fading golden light. In a matter of seconds, the terrifying, dimension-hopping monster was gone, erased from reality by an attack it could neither absorb nor comprehend. The cavern was plunged into a sudden, ringing silence. The only sounds were the dripping of water, the distant roar of the waterfall, and the ragged, heavy brea. Thing of 4 beings who should have been enemies. Naruto stood over Sasuke's still form, his own chest heaving, the divine lightning flickering out around him. The chakra chains retracted into his arm. The tendril that had been attached to Sasuke had dissolved with the rest of the creature, but a faint, dark stain remained on Sasuke's chest, a mark of the void's touch. Yoruichi landed softly, her shunko dissipating. Her clothes torn and her body gleaming with a fine sheen of sweat. She stared at Naruto, her usual smirk gone, replaced by an expression of raw, unadulterated astonishment. Alara leaned heavily on her staff, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The strain of holding the lattice had been immense. Her eyes, however, were fixed on Naruto, glowing with an intensity that was no longer just scientific curiosity. It was the look of a scholar who had just witnessed a miracle. Valeria lowered her rifle, the weapon venting hot steam. Her internal chronometer told her the entire engagement had lasted precisely 94 seconds. In that time, they had faced an unknown, extra-dimensional threat and had not only survived, but had triumphed through perfect, instinctive teamwork. Orchestrated by the very anomaly she had been sent to contain. Her programming was screaming at her with 1,000 contradictions. Threat neutralized, she said, her synthesized voice sounding almost uncertain for the first time. Naruto didn't respond. He knelt beside Sasuke, his hand hovering over the dark stain on his friend's chest. He could feel the lingering touch of the void, a cold, dead patch in Sasuke's energy. With a deep breath, he channeled a soft, warm, golden light from his palm, carefully, gently coaxing the stain out, purifying the last remnants of the leech's violation. The silence stretched, filled with the unspoken reality of what had just happened. They had worked together. They had followed Naruto's lead. And they had won. The lines of animosity that had been so sharply drawn between them had been blurred, washed away by the heat of a desperate battle. Yoruichi was the first to find her voice. She sauntered over, her walk a lazy, confident sway, and stopped beside Naruto. Looking down at the unconscious Sasuke. "You know," she said, her voice a low, husky purr that was startlingly intimate in the quiet cavern. "For a bunch of complete strangers who were trying to kill each other 5 minutes ago, we don't make a half-bad team." She looked at Naruto, a genuine, dazzling smile spreading across her face. "You've got some good moves, pretty boy. Good instincts. I like a man who knows how to take charge." Alara approached more slowly, her regal composure returning. She stopped on Naruto's other side, her gaze flicking from the purifying light in his hand to his face. "Your strategic acumen is formidable," she conceded, the words sounding like they were being physically pried from her. "You correctly assessed the nature of the threat and formulated a multidisciplinary counter-strategy with a 98% probability of success in under 3 seconds. It was an impressive display of tactical processing. It was the highest praise an academic like Alara could give, couched in the language of science, but the undertone of deep, intellectual respect was unmistakable." Valeria holstered her rifle with a decisive magnetic click. She walked over and stood behind the other two, a silent, armored sentinel. She ran a quick diagnostic scan on Naruto. Vital signs. Stable. Energy output. Fluctuating but within safe parameters. Stress levels. Minimal. Her mandate was to observe. And what she was observing was a leader of unparalleled effectiveness. A soldier's respect was simpler, more direct. It was earned in fire. "Your command decisions were optimal," she stated. Her voice returning to its flat, professional tone. But there was a new quality to it, a lack of the previous hostility. It was a statement of fact from one warrior to another. She did something that was completely outside her mission parameters. She unsealed a pouch on her tactical belt and produced a small, silver packet. "You have expended a significant amount of energy. This contains 5,000 calories and all necessary micronutrients for accelerated tissue regeneration. Standard field ration." She held it out to him. Naruto looked up from his work on Sasuke. He saw the three of them, gathered around him. The flirtatious Shinigami with her dangerous smile. The haughty archmage with her grudging, intellectual respect. The stoic cyborg soldier with her practical, unsolicited offer of aid. The animosity was gone, replaced by a complex, fragile web of curiosity, respect, and a shared, life-or-death experience. He had their attention. He had their respect. And, though none of them would have admitted it, he had their fascination. A small, genuine smile touched Naruto's lips. It was the first one he had truly felt since his awakening. "Thanks," he said, accepting the ration pack from Valeria. "I appreciate it." It was in that moment of fragile, newfound camaraderie that a low groan echoed from the ground. It was Sasuke. All four of them froze, their attention snapping to the Uchiha. His brow furrowed in pain, his head turning slightly on the stone floor. The dark stain on his chest had completely faded under Naruto's ministration, leaving his skin clean. Slowly, his eyelids began to flutter. Naruto held his breath. He had stabilized his friend, saved him from the shadow creature, and purged the void leech's taint. But he had no idea what state Sasuke's mind would be in. Would he awaken with the same hatred, the same desire for revolution that had driven him to their final, catastrophic battle? Sasuke's eyes opened. But they were not the eyes Naruto knew. The left eye was not the cold, terrifying purple of the Rinnegan with its concentric circles. The right was not the blood red of the Sharingan with its tomo. Both of his eyes were a clear, startling, and utterly human black. They were the eyes he'd had as a child, before the massacre, before the curse mark, before the endless, spiraling descent into darkness. And they were filled not with hatred or power, but with a profound, soul-shaking clarity. He looked up, past Naruto, past the three impossible women standing behind him. He looked at the roof of the cave, at the world, as if seeing it for the very first time. Naruto, he whispered, his voice hoarse, cracked, and utterly bewildered. What happened? Where are we? Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Stillness of the Axis. The ECHO of Sasuke's bewildered voice hung in the cavern, a sound more shocking than any explosion. It was a voice stripped of its arrogance, its rage, its chilling certainty. It was the voice of a boy waking from a long and terrible nightmare, only to find himself in a world stranger than any dream. Naruto's golden eyes softened, the divine power within him receding to a gentle, internal hum. He saw not the rival, the traitor, the would-be revolutionary. He saw his friend, lost and broken, finally returned from the brink. He offered a small, weary smile. "You lost, Tem," he said, the old insult now devoid of heat, carrying only a familiar, reassuring warmth. "We both did. We nearly died. I had to do something drastic to save us." Sasuke's black eyes, wide and unnervingly clear, darted from Naruto's crimson hair and glowing tails to the three impossible figures standing behind him. He registered the dark-skinned woman with the torn clothes and the predatory aura, the regal woman in indigo robes holding a crystal staff, and the armored soldier whose cybernetic eyes seemed to pierce right through him. His mind, accustomed to analyzing threats in terms of chakra and kekkei genkai, found no purchase. It was like trying to read a language he'd never seen. He instinctively tried to activate his Sharingan, to process the overwhelming flood of information, but there was nothing. No familiar surge of chakra to his optic nerves. No spin of tomo. Just nothing. The emptiness was a physical shock, a phantom limb gone numb. "My eyes," he whispered, his hand rising shakily to his face. "I can't feel them. My chakra, it's gone." "Sasuke," Naruto said gently, but with an unshakable finality. "The Rinnegan, the Sharingan, whatever was left of the sage's power in us. Our final clash burned it all away. I had just enough left to keep your heart beating. The rest is gone." The news should have sent Sasuke into a spiral of rage or despair. His entire life, his identity, his power, was tied to those eyes. But the rage wasn't there. The well of hatred he had drawn from for so long was dry. All he felt was a vast, hollow emptiness, and beneath that, a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a decade: relief. The burden was gone. "Gone," he repeated, the word a soft exhalation. He looked at his own hands, then back at Naruto. Then, "How are you?" His gaze traced the lines of Naruto's ethereal tails, the sheer, undeniable power that radiated from him like heat from a forge. "Long story," Naruto said, glancing back at his audience. "We've got company." Yoruichi's grin was sharp and inquisitive. "So, this is the famous Sasuke Uchiha," she purred, sauntering forward. She crouched down, bringing herself to eye level with the bewildered shinobi, her golden eyes appraising him with the intensity of a cat studying a new and peculiar mouse. "Less intimidating without the fancy eyes, isn't he? He just looks like a lost little boy." Sasuke flinched back, instinctively wary of her predatory closeness. Analysis of secondary subject. Designation: Sasuke Uchiha. Complete. Valeria's synthesized voice cut in, her tone flat and informational. Previous classification: threat level high, due to unique bio-spiritual energy readings. Current classification: threat level negligible. Subject is exhibiting signs of extreme chakra depletion and the loss of previously detected genetic markers. He is For all intents and purposes, a non-combatant. Alara's gaze was far more intense. She saw not a powerless boy, but a scientific marvel. Fascinating, she mused, her voice crisp. His energy pathways are not merely empty. They have been reset. The Dujutsu wasn't just disabled, its foundational structure has been erased from his spiritual and genetic code. This suggests your power, Anomaly 0, does not merely overpower or heal. It fundamentally revises. It edits reality at a causal level. The potential applications are staggering. This barrage of alien terminology and ached analysis was too much for Sasuke's reeling mind. He looked to the only anchor he had in this sea of madness. Naruto, what is going on? Who are these people? Naruto helped Sasuke to a sitting position, his back against the cavern wall. He gave his three companions a look that was both a plea for patience and a quiet command for silence. They're visitors from other worlds. Like I said, long story. Right now, we need to get out of this cave. It's not safe. He is correct, Alara stated, her attention shifting from Sasuke to the larger tactical situation. The void leech's entry create a residual weakness in the dimensional fabric. This location is now a beacon for other, similar entities. Furthermore, our own arrivals have left distinct energetic signatures. It is only a matter of time before this cave becomes a nexus for unwanted attention. My ship's stealth generators can mask our position, Valeria offered, but they are designed for technological and basic energy signatures. They may not be effective against whatever she is. She nodded towards Yoruichi, or her, a nod to Alara. And I'd rather not be cooped up in a metal can with you three, Yoruichi added cheerfully. No offense, tin girl. But I like my legroom. Then we need a new location, Naruto said, rising to his full height. He closed his eyes, and the air around him grew still. The golden spheres of light he had created dimmed slightly, as if all the energy in the cavern was being focused inward, toward him. The very sound of the waterfall seemed to fade into the background. This was not the aggressive, outward-focused sensory ability of a shinobi. He was not merely extending his chakra to feel for others. He was merging his consciousness with the world itself. He could feel the flow of water through the stone beneath them. The slow, patient life of the lichen on the walls, the deep, slumbering energy of the earth itself. His senses expanded, sweeping out from the cavern in a silent, rushing wave of perception. He felt the entire valley of the end, the lingering bitterness of his fight with Sasuke staining the air. He felt the forests beyond, the life force of every tree, every animal. His awareness spread like wildfire across rivers and mountains, covering the whole of the land of fire in a matter of seconds. He felt the massive, combined force of the allied shinobi armies, a sea of anxious chakra signatures, beginning their slow march back from the great battlefield. He felt the small, intensely bright flame of Kakashi's energy, fraught with worry. He felt the warm, gentle green of Sakura's, tirelessly healing the wounded. And he felt their focus, their concern, all directed toward this valley. They would be here in a matter of hours. He needed a place that was hidden, not just from shinobi, but from science and magic. A place of power that would feel like home. He pushed his senses further, past the bustling villages and well-trod paths, to the forgotten corners of the world. He searched for an echo. A resonance that matched the unique harmony of his new being, a fusion of human spirit, natural energy, and something more ancient. And then he found it. Deep in the sprawling, primordial forests that bordered the land of fire and the land of whirlpools, hidden by mountains and shrouded in a natural, low-level genjutsu created by the unique magnetic fields of the rock, was a place that hummed with a quiet, immense power. It was an island of tranquility in a world of noise. He could feel ancient, dormant seals carved into living stone, a great torii gate overgrown with moss, and a central shrine that pulsed with a gentle, welcoming energy. It felt familiar. It felt like his mother's chakra. It was an Uzumaki shrine. Naruto's eyes snapped open, the gold and light within them shining with renewed purpose. I've found it, he announced. A place of shelter, hidden and defensible. It's a long way from here. We need to leave now, before our own forces arrive. Explaining all of this, he gestured to the three women and his own transformed state, is a conversation I'm not ready to have. An admirable sentiment, but a logistical problem, Alara pointed out. Her practical nature asserting itself. The one you call Sasuke is in no condition to travel. And I doubt your shinobi techniques of rapid movement can accommodate us all. Don't worry about that, Yoruichi said with a grin. Cracking her knuckles. I can carry the pretty boy and the Ice Queen here. Tin Girl can fly in her ship. And you, Crimson, she winked at Naruto, can probably keep up. My vessel can transport all of us with greater efficiency and safety, Valeria countered, her voice flat. It offers atmospheric shielding and is capable of reaching the designated coordinates in approximately 7 minutes. Before another argument over logistics could erupt, Naruto held up a hand. I'll handle the transportation. He walked to the center of the cavern, his bare feet making no sound on the stone. He placed his hands together in a seal that none of them recognized, a simple joining of his palms. He focused his will, not on molding chakra into a jutsu, but on commanding the divine energy that was now his to wield. He drew upon the concept of stability, of support, of motion. The crimson gold energy of his tails flowed outward, not as a wave of force, but as a stream of liquid light. It pooled on the floor, spreading into a perfect circle about 15 feet in diameter. The light solidified, not into hard crystal, but into a semi-translucent platform of pure, stable energy. It hovered a foot off the ground, humming with a power that was both immense and perfectly contained. It looked like a disk of captured sunset. Everyone on, he said simply. Yoruichi let out a low whistle of appreciation. Alara's eyes were wide, her mind frantically trying to deconstruct the principle behind such a creation. It was not a magical construct, nor a technological force field. He had, it seemed, willed a piece of his own divine nature into a solid, functional form. Valeria's optical sensors scanned the platform, her internal display flashing with a string of incomprehensible readings. Material composition. Unknown. Energy source. Self-contained, self-sustaining. Structural integrity. Absolute. Naruto helped the still weak Sasuke onto the platform, then stepped aboard himself. Valeria was the first to follow, her armored boots making a soft, metallic sound on the glowing surface. She gave the platform a solid stomp. It didn't even vibrate. Structurally sound, she reported. As if it were a matter of course. Alara, after a moment's hesitation, glided onto the disc, her robes settling around her, her intellectual curiosity overriding her innate caution. Yoruichi was the last. She sauntered aboard, a playful sway in her hips, and came to a stop unnecessarily close to Naruto. She leaned in, her voice a low whisper in his ear, her breath warm against his skin. You're just full of tricks, aren't you? Power, leadership, and now you're a magical chauffeur. A girl could get used to this. Naruto felt a faint warmth spread through his chest at her words, a feel indistinct from the divine fire that now powered him. It was a simple, human reaction, and it felt surprisingly good. He gave her a small, sideways smile. Hold on, he said, his voice loud enough for all to hear. The platform of light rose silently, lifting them towards the roof of the cavern. It didn't blast through the stone. It simply phased through it, the rock becoming momentarily intangible as they passed. They ascended through the earth and emerged into the gray, rain-swept sky above the waterfall. Below them, Valeria's black ship detached itself from the cliff face and, with a silent hum of its engines, fell into formation behind them, its cloaking field engaging and causing it to vanish from sight. The view from above was devastating. The valley of the end was no longer a valley. It was a crater, a wound in the earth, the great river boiling and churning where their final attacks had met. The scale of the destruction was immense, a testament to the power they had once wielded. Sasuke stared down at it, his face pale. He remembered the hatred, the screaming power, the desire to destroy everything. Now, looking at the consequence of that hatred, he felt nothing but a profound, soul-deep emptiness. It had all been for this. For a muddy hole in the ground. Don't look back, Naruto said, his voice soft but firm. He didn't look at Sasuke, his own gaze fixed forward. There's nothing for us there anymore. With a surge of thought from Naruto, the platform accelerated. It did not create a sonic boom or buffet them with wind. A thin, invisible shell of his energy formed around the disc, protecting them from the elements, creating a pocket of perfect stillness as they shot across the sky at incredible speed. They flew over the ravaged landscape, over forests still smoldering from stray jutsu, over rivers choked with debris. It was a world scarred by war. The journey was silent. Each of them was lost in their own thoughts. Sasuke grappled with the death of his old self. Yoruichi watched Naruto, her playful curiosity solidifying into a deep, genuine interest. Here was a being of immense power who used it not for conquest or arrogance, but to protect, to shelter, to build. It was a novelty she found intensely attractive. Alara, for her part, was experiencing a crisis of faith. Her entire life was based on the principle that the universe was a set of rules to be learned and exploited. Naruto was not playing by the rules. He was writing new ones. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Valeria, flying on autopilot behind them, reviewed the data she had collected. Her mission was to contain the anomaly. But her observations suggested the anomaly was the only thing holding this fragile, impossible alliance together. He was not a source of chaos. He was the axis around which this new chaos was beginning to organize. Her programming dictated she report this, but a new, unprogrammed instinct suggested she should protect him. In what felt like mere minutes, the landscape below began to change. The scarred, war-torn lands gave way to ancient, untouched forests. The trees here were colossal, their canopies so thick that the forest floor was in a perpetual state of twilight. A thick mist clung to the ground, and the air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth, rich loam, and the clean, crisp smell of ozone from the lingering storm. Naruto slowed the platform, guiding it down through the canopy. They descended into a hidden world. They were in a small, circular valley, surrounded by sheer, mist-shrouded cliffs. A clear, cold river snaked through the valley floor. And in the center, on a small rise, stood the ruins of the shrine. It was a place of breathtaking, serene beauty. A massive, stone torii gate, its red paint almost completely faded and its surface covered in a thick blanket of green moss, marked the entrance to the sacred ground. Beyond it, a series of stone lanterns, equally ancient, lined a path that led to the central structure. The shrine itself was a simple, elegant building of dark, weathered wood, its gracefully curved roof now home to flowering vines. The structure was in disrepair, but it was not derelict. It felt asleep, waiting. As the platform of light touched down on the damp, mossy ground before the torii gate, it dissolved back into Naruto's being. The sudden silence was profound, broken only by the gentle gurgle of the river and the sigh of the wind through the giant trees. The air here was thick with natural energy, so pure and potent that it was a tangible presence. What is this place? Yoruichi asked, her voice hushed. Her usual bravado tempered by the palpable sense of peace that permeated the valley. A remnant of my clan, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the shrine. He felt a deep, resonant hum within his soul. A feeling of coming home to a place he had never been. The seals carved into the stone of the shrine pulsed with a faint, welcoming light, responding to his presence. The Uzumaki were masters of sealing jutsu. Fuinjutsu. They built places like this, places of power, sanctuaries. He took a step forward, towards the gate. As he passed under the great stone torii, the dormant seals flared to life. A wave of shimmering, intricate golden energy washed over the valley, a complex matrix of ancient formulas and divine will. The mist swirled, and the entrance to the valley seemed to vanish behind them. Hidden by a powerful illusion. A dome of silent, protective energy enveloped the entire area, cutting them off from the outside world. The ancient Uzumaki sanctuary had accepted its new master. Naruto turned to the others, his face calm, but his golden eyes burning with a quiet intensity. Welcome, he said, his voice resonating with the newfound power of the shrine itself. To our new home. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Wood. The silence of the Uzumaki shrine was a living thing. It was not the dead, empty silence of a tomb, but the deep, breathing stillness of a primordial forest. A quietude composed of 1,000 subtle sounds. The sigh of wind through the branches of ancient trees, the gentle murmur of the river over smooth stones, the rustle of unseen life in the undergrowth. After the chaos of battle, the scream of jutsu, and the oppressive hum of alien technology, the profound peace of the valley was a balm on their frayed nerves. The air itself felt different here. Clean and charged with a potent, vital energy that seemed to soak directly into the skin, easing the ache in tired muscles and clearing the mind. The protective dome Naruto had activated was invisible from the inside, but its presence was a palpable reality. It filtered the stormy gray light of the outside world into a soft, diffused luminescence, lending the valley an ethereal, timeless quality. They stood in a world apart, a pocket of forgotten history sealed away from the ravages of time and war. For a long moment, no one moved. They were four beings from four realities, standing at the threshold of a fifth, and the sheer, beautiful impossibility of it all held them in thrall. Sasuke was the first to stir. Weakness still clung to him like a shroud, the pure air seemed to lend him a sliver of strength. He took a shaky step, then another, his bare feet sinking into the soft, damp moss. He walked to the edge of the river, his dark, human eyes wide with a sense of wonder he hadn't felt since he was a small child. He could see the intricate patterns of the pebbles beneath the clear, flowing water, the way the light dappled through the leaves above to dance on the surface. Without the analytical, chakra-sensing power of the Sharingan, the world was no longer a collection of threats, power levels, and potential targets. It was just beautiful. The raw, unfiltered sensory input was overwhelming. He knelt, dipping a hand into the cold, clear water, and simply watched it flow over his fingers, a profound stillness settling over his features for the first time in over a decade. Naruto watched him, a knot of old pain loosening in his chest. This was the first step. The long, difficult journey back to the person Sasuke had been, before the darkness consumed him. He gave his friend the space he needed, turning his attention to the others. He was the host here, the unlikely anchor of this impossible fellowship, and he felt a strange, new sense of responsibility for them. There should be living quarters inside the main shrine, he said, his voice quiet, careful not to break the valley's spell. It's old, but the seals should have preserved it. Let's get settled in. We can figure out our next move once everyone's rested. The unspoken part of his statement hung in the air. And once we've figured out what we are to each other. Yoruichi's golden eyes were sparkling with a restless, feline curiosity. She stretched languidly, a movement of liquid grace that spoke of contained power. Living quarters are fine, but I'm more interested in the grounds. A place this drenched in natural energy is bound to have some interesting nooks and crannies. I'm going to have a look around. Don't wait up. With a predatory grin and a wink aimed at Naruto, she vanished. There was no explosion of speed, no sound of displaced air. She was simply there one moment and gone the next, her mastery of Shunpo allowing her to meld with the shadows of the ancient forest. Alara, by contrast, seemed almost physically repulsed by the idea of settling in. Her analytical gaze was sweeping across the intricate fuinjutsu formulas that glowed faintly on the torii gate and the stone lanterns. Her mind, a vast library of arcane knowledge, had found a new, utterly alien language to decipher. The geometric intricacy of these matrices is astounding, she breathed. Her voice filled with an academic reverence that bordered on worship. She approached the nearest stone lantern, her fingers hovering inches from the surface, tracing the lines of a complex spiral seal. This is not magic as I understand it. It does not draw power from the ether. It persuades reality. It sets down rules, conditions, and the universe simply obeys. It is the language of creation itself. I must study these. The living quarters can wait. The Archmage, a being of immense power and regal authority, was reduced to an eager scholar, lost in the wonder of a new and profound discovery. That left Valeria. The cyborg soldier stood still, a stark figure of black armor and advanced technology against the organic, ancient backdrop. Her helmet was retracted, revealing a FACE that was a mask of disciplined neutrality. But her cybernetic eyes were working overtime, scanning everything, their faint blue glow the only alien light in the valley. My vessel is in silent, cloaked orbit above the energy dome. She reported, her voice its usual, functional monotone. Its long-range sensors will provide an early warning system if the barrier is breached. I will conduct a I'm at her sweep to establish a defensive protocol and identify potential tactical vulnerabilities. Her words were practical, her purpose clear. But Naruto saw something else in her stance, in the rigid set of her shoulders. She was a soldier without a battlefield, a weapon without a designated threat. She was creating a mission for herself because it was the only way she knew how to function. Val, he said, the shortened name slipping out naturally. It's all right. The barrier is secure. You can stand down. She turned to him, her blue eyes unblinking. A perimeter is not secure until it has been verified. Subject, Naruto. The slight hesitation, the correction of his designation, was a seismic shift in their interaction. Complacency is the soldier's greatest enemy. And exhaustion is a close second, he countered gently. You fought. You helped save my friend. You've earned a rest. He gestured toward the shrine. Go. Find a room. The sweep can wait until morning. For a long moment, Valeria's internal processors seemed to struggle with the command. It was not an order from a superior officer. It was a suggestion, an offer of respite. It was care. The concept was an inefficient variable in her combat-oriented programming. Yet, she found herself unable to argue. The logic was sound. Her energy reserves were depleted, and operating at less than peak efficiency was a tactical liability. She gave a single, sharp nod. Affirmative. I will find a defensible position inside the structure to enter a low-power recharge cycle. Without another word, she turned and marched with crisp, efficient steps toward the shrine entrance. Naruto was left alone in the clearing. He looked at Sasuke by the river, lost in his own world. He could sense Yoruichi moving like a ghost through the trees. Alara deep in communion with an ancient seal, and Valeria methodically mapping the interior of the shrine. They were not a team. They were a collection of powerful, solitary individuals, temporarily sharing the same space. But it was a start. He let out a long breath and turned his own attention to the shrine. As he stepped onto the weathered wooden porch, he placed a hand on the building's main support pillar. The moment his palm made contact, a wave of warmth flowed from the wood into his arm, traveling straight to his soul. It was a feeling of welcome, of recognition. The shrine knew him. It knew the Uzumaki blood, the echo of Kurama's divine energy, and the unique signature of his own indomitable spirit. Information flooded his mind, not as words or images, but as pure, intuitive understanding. He knew the layout of the building, the central worship hall, the meditation rooms, the archives where sealing scrolls were stored, the small but functional living quarters in the back. He knew of the hidden training ground behind the shrine, nestled in a small canyon with a waterfall of its own. He knew of the central well that drew up water so pure, so infused with natural energy, that it could heal minor wounds and purify the body of impurities. The shrine was more than a building. It was a sanctuary machine, a complex fuinjutsu construct designed to support, protect, and strengthen the Uzumaki who resided within it. And it was now his. He spent the next hour exploring, not as an intruder, but as a master returning to his ancestral home. He walked through the dusty, yet perfectly preserved, rooms. The air inside was still and smelled of old cedar wood and dried herbs. He ran his fingers over scrolls stored in sealed niches, feeling the latent power within the ink. He found the kitchen. And with a simple application of his will, a sphere of his golden energy floated into the central hearth, igniting the wood that had been laid there centuries ago, creating a warm, crackling fire that chased the damp chill from the air. He was beginning to understand the nature of his new power. It was not like chakra, which had to be molded and forced into a specific shape or jutsu. This divine energy was an extension of his will. He thought of light, and light appeared. He thought of fire, and the hearth ignited. The limitations, he was beginning to realize, were not in the power itself, but in his own imagination and the clarity of his intent. His explorations eventually led him to the back of the shrine, where a path led down into a small, secluded canyon. Here, the roar of a waterfall, smaller than the one in the valley of the end but just as beautiful, filled the air. The canyon floor was a perfect circle of flat, bare earth, surrounded by sheer rock walls varied in more complex and powerful-looking seals. This was the training ground. A place designed for one to unleash their full power without fear of destroying the surrounding landscape. And it was here that he found Yoruichi. She was not running, or training, or exploring. She was sitting on a large, sun-dappled rock at the edge of the plunge basin, her feet dangling in the churning, crystal-clear water. She had shed the torn remnants of her Shinigami uniform and was clad only in the simple white undergarments. Her back was to him, a canvas of smooth, dark skin and sculpted muscle. She was perfectly still, a predator at rest. Simply absorbing the atmosphere of the place. He approached quietly, but he knew she was aware of him. She didn't turn until he was standing a few feet away. Found my favorite spot already, she said. Her voice a low purr that blended with the sound of the waterfall. She patted the rock beside her. Pull up a seat. The water's nice. Naruto sat, leaving a respectful distance between them. He looked out at the water, at the way the spray caught the light, creating a perpetual rainbow in the air. It's peaceful, he agreed. It's more than peaceful, she corrected, her golden eyes fixed on his face. Her gaze intense and unnervingly direct. This place is saturated with life. In the Soul Society, everything is made of reishi, spirit particles. It's a world of the dead, essentially. Even the air has a certain stillness to it. But this is different. It's wild, untamed. It feels alive. She leaned closer, her playful smirk returning. A bit like you, Crimson. Naruto met her gaze, his own calm and unwavering. I feel it too. The energy here, it resonates with me. With what Kurama and I have become. It feels like it's healing the parts of me that were broken. We're all a little broken, aren't we? Yoruichi said, her voice softening for a fraction of a second. The playful mask slipped, and he saw a glimpse of the ancient soul beneath, a warrior who had seen too many wars. Lost too many friends. Your friend the brooding Uchiha, the Ice Queen with her magic books, the tin soldier who's forgotten how to be human. We're a collection of beautiful disasters. She paused, then bumped his shoulder with her own. And you're the one who somehow managed to get us all pointed in the same direction. That takes a special kind of talent. Her attraction to him, he realized, wasn't just about his power. It was about his nature. In her world of rigid hierarchies, ancient traditions, and political backstabbing, his straightforward, honest street strength and his innate desire to protect were a breath of fresh, clean air. He was a force of nature, much like the valley itself, and she was drawn to that untamed, vital quality. I didn't do anything, he said honestly. A monster attacked, and we all chose to fight it instead of each other. You gave the orders, she countered. And we followed. Don't sell yourself short. Leadership isn't about being the strongest. It's about making others stronger when they're with you. You did that today. She stood up in a single, fluid motion. Now, as much as I'd love to sit and trade philosophies with you all day. This place is making my muscles itch. I need a real workout. You feel up for a spar, pretty boy. No powers, no magic, no tech. Just hand to hand. I want to see what that new body of yours can really do. The challenge hung in the air, a test not just of his skill, but of his character. It was her way of connecting, of understanding. For a warrior like Yoruichi, a true measure of AP. Urson was found in the crucible of combat. A slow grin spread across Naruto's face, the first truly carefree expression he'd worn since his awakening. The thrill of a challenge, the promise of a good fight, was a language he understood perfectly. You're on, he said. But don't cry when you lose. While Naruto and Yoruichi engaged in a spar that was less a fight and more a high-speed, explosive dance of Hakuta versus a divinely enhanced version of the Shinobi Academy's taijutsu, Alara was having an experience that was, for her, far more intimate. She had found the shrine's archives. It was a small, windowless room. The walls lined with wooden racks containing hundreds of scrolls of varying sizes. A master preservation seal, woven into the very structure of the room, kept the air perfectly dry and the temperature constant. The moment she stepped inside, the seals on the door had glowed, and soft, ethereal lights had ignited, illuminating the space. For an archmage whose life was dedicated to the acquisition of knowledge, this was paradise. She ignored the scrolls on jutsu, on tactics, on history. Her entire focus was on the fuinjutsu section. She carefully unrolled the first scroll. Her magically enhanced eyes devouring the complex, calligraphed symbols. Her mind, capable of processing multi-layered arcane formulas in seconds, struggled. This was not a formula to be memorized and recited. It was a statement of intent, a philosophical concept given form. A simple storage seal wasn't a spell that created a pocket dimension. The scroll explained it as a negotiation with space-time itself. The seal proposed a paradox, that a large object could occupy a small space. The intricate swirl of the ink was the argument, the conditional clauses, and the final, central kanji was the binding contract. Reality. Finding the argument sound, simply complied. It was the most elegant, most profound piece of theoretical metaphysics she had ever encountered. It's not about power. It's about balance. Alara looked up, startled. Naruto stood in the doorway, his crimson hair damp with sweat, his body radiating a vibrant, post-exertion energy. He had a few minor bruises on his arms and a small cut on his cheek. All of which were visibly healing as she watched. He leaned against the doorframe, his presence filling the small space. "The spar is over?" she asked, her voice a little stiff. She felt a strange, illogical sense of being caught doing something private. "For now," he said with a small smile. "Yoruichi is fast. I think we'll call it a draw." He looked at the scroll in her hands. "I felt your concentration from across the shrine. It's more intense than when you were preparing a spell in the cave." This, Alara gestured to the scrolls, her voice filled with a frustration and excitement she rarely showed. "This is a complete recontextualization of the fundamental laws of the universe. My magic is the application of force. I bend reality to my will. But this is the art of asking reality to bend itself. The level of understanding, of cosmic empathy, required to create these is sublime." She was drawn to him, she realized, not as a physical being, but as he living embodiment of this sublime principle. His power wasn't a weapon he wielded, it was an intrinsic state of being. He didn't bend reality, he was a new reality. He was the ultimate source code. The grand unified theory she had spent her entire life searching for. To be near him, to study and understand him, was her life's new, singular purpose. "My mother was from the Uzumaki clan," Naruto said, walking into the room. He picked up a different scroll, one detailing the principles of barrier seals. "She was the one who taught my father how to seal half of Kurama inside me. She was a master of this art. When Kurama and I fused, her chakra that was left in the seal, it became a part of me too. I think I can read these now. Not just with my eyes, but I can feel what they mean." He held the scroll out to her. "Maybe we can study them together. Your knowledge of cosmic laws and my innate connection. We might be able to figure them out faster." The offer was a simple one, but to Alara, it was a gift of unimaginable value. Access to the source code itself. A chance to collaborate with the very paradox she sought to understand. A thrill, cold and sharp, ran down her spine. It was the thrill of discovery. The most potent aphrodisiac she had ever known. "A logical and efficient proposal," she said, her voice regaining its formal composure, but her winter sky eyes burned with an intense, focused light. "I accept." In the main hall of the shrine, the fire crackled merrily in the hearth. Valeria had completed her recharge cycle, and was now methodically cleaning her plasma rifle. Disassembling and reassembling it with a practiced, almost meditative efficiency. She had, as ordered, found a room. It was small, bare, and had a clear line of sight to both the main entrance and the back exit. A perfect defensive position. But as she sat by the fire, the warmth a strange and unfamiliar sensation against the cold composites of her armor, she found her thoughts straying from tactical analysis. She replayed the fight with the Void Leech. She replayed Naruto's effortless neutralization of her, Yoruichi, and Alara. And she replayed his simple offer of rest, the ration pack, the quiet command to stand down. Her life had been a series of directives. The Velez Corporation did not nurture its soldiers, it forged them. Emotion was a liability. Empathy was a weakness. But Naruto operated on a different axis. He led not through fear or authority, but through a quiet strength that inspired confidence. He protected not because it was his mission, but because it was his nature. He was a commander she would follow not out of duty, but out of choice. The thought was a glitch in her programming, a dangerous and deeply compelling one. The main door slid open, and Sasuke entered. He looked cleaner. His face washed and his hair still damp from the river. The profound emptiness in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet, searching uncertainty. He saw her by the fire and hesitated. "I have analyzed the shrine's immediate exterior," Valeria stated, not looking up from her weapon. It was her way of initiating contact, a report of facts. "There are 37 distinct varieties. of edible plants and a consistent source of potable water. The local fauna appears non-hostile. We have sustainable resources for an extended period. Sasuke was taken aback by the unexpected information. He slowly walked over and sat on the other side of the hearth, soaking in the warmth. You're a soldier, he stated, his voice quiet. Affirmative. Call sign Kestrel. Velez Sector Spetsnaz, Corporate Enforcement Division. She replied automatically. And you're not from this world. Negative. A silence fell between them, two people defined by their pasts, now stripped of them. The Uchiha without his eyes. The soldier without her war. What happens now? Sasuke asked, his voice barely a whisper. He wasn't asking her specifically, but the universe at large. Valeria stopped her work. She looked at him, her cybernetic eyes analyzing his posture, his tone, his micro-expressions. She detected no deception, only genuine, profound loss of purpose. She found herself accessing a part of her memory banks she rarely touched, her own recruitment files. The day the corporation took her from a war-torn orphanage, promising her purpose, strength, a future. They had given her all those things. But they had taken something else in return. New objectives are acquired, she said, her voice softer than Sasuke had yet heard it. A new mission is defined. Until then, we observe. We adapt. We survive. She held up a small, sealed packet. It was another field ration. Consume this. Your caloric intake has been critically low. Survival is predicated on maintaining physical readiness. Sasuke looked at the offered packet. Then at the stoic, armored woman. In her own strange, clinical way, she was trying to help. He took the packet with a quiet, thanks. It was then that Valeria's head tilted slightly. A subtle but sharp movement. A barely audible, high-frequency tone was sounding in her auditory sensors. An alert. I am detecting a low-level energy fluctuation at the edge of the barrier, she announced. Her entire demeanor shifting back to one of hypervigilance. She was on her feet in an instant, her rifle reassembled and in her hands. The signature is anomalous. It does not match any of our energy types. But it is similar to the residual signature of the Void Leakerupt. The peace of the shrine was shattered. The whispers in the wood had begun. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Stain of Unknowing. The peace of the sanctuary did not break, it was punctured. Valeria's alert, a clinical statement of fact delivered in her synthesized monotone, was a scalpel slicing through the warm, quiet atmosphere they had just begun to inhabit. The crackling hearth, the scent of old wood, the profound stillness of the valley, all of it receded into the background, replaced by the sharp, cold edge of a new and unknown threat. In an instant, the disparate individuals became a cohesive unit again, the memory of the Void Leech a fresh and potent catalyst. Naruto, who had been in the archives with Alara, was the first to arrive in the main hall. He didn't run. He simply flowed from one place to the next, a crimson gold blur that resolved into solidity beside Valeria. Yoruichi appeared a heartbeat later, landing silently on the hearth's mantle like a shadow detaching itself from the wall, her playful demeanor gone, replaced by the honed deadliness of a seasoned captain. Alara swept in last, her indigo robes swirling. Her face a mask of intense, intellectual focus. Report. Naruto's voice was calm, cutting through the tension. He was no longer just the host. He was the commander. The axis around which they instinctively organized. The barrier's master seal, located at the Torii gate, is exhibiting a parasitic energy signature, Valeria stated, her cybernetic eyes glowy. As she processed the data stream from her orbiting ship. The signature is not a direct assault. It is subtle, a low-level resonance that is attempting to decohere the Fuinjutsu matrix. The resin. Ant's pattern shares 17.3% of its quantum fluctuation with the residual energy of the Void Leech, but it lacks the bio-spiritual consumption markers. It is not feeding. It is erasing. Erasing. Alara's brow furrowed. The concept both alien and terrifyingly intriguing. A spell, a force, can be countered, blocked, or absorbed. But to erase its existence, that would require an ontological weapon. A force that attacks not the effect, but the cause. The very concept of the barrier. Enough theory. Yoruichi growled from her perch, her muscles tensed. Let's go get a look at this thing. I don't like things nibbling on my cage. There was a quiet shuffle from the corner of the room. Sasuke had risen to his feet, his face pale in the firelight, but his expression set with a grim determination. I'm coming with you. Naruto turned to him, his golden eyes softening slightly. Sasuke, you're in no condition. I'm not going to sit here and wait. Dobi, Sasuke cut him off, the old insult a surprising spark of his former self. I'm not a combatant. I know that. But I can still see. I can still observe. I won't be left behind. Naruto saw the flicker of pride in his friend's eyes, the despair. Eight need to not be rendered completely useless. To deny him this would be a greater wound than any physical blow. He gave a single, sharp nod. Stay behind us. No exceptions. They moved as one, a procession of impossible beings. Out of the warm sanctuary of the shrine and back into the cool, misty air of the valley. The soft, ethereal light seemed dimmer now, the shadows between the ancient trees deeper and less welcoming. The gentle murmur of the river sounded like a nervous whisper. As they approached the great Torii gate, they could all feel it. A subtle wrongness in the air. A dissonant note in the valley's perfect harmony. It was a feeling that crawled up the spine, a primal instinct screaming that something was fundamentally out of place. The master seal was carved into the center of the Torii's massive crosspiece. A complex vortex of Uzumaki calligraphy that should have been glowing with a steady, golden light. And it was. But at its edge, a section of the glowing lines was flickering. And upon this flickering edge clung a patch of something that defied description. It was not a creature of shadow like the leech. It was not a physical entity. It was a stain of anti-color. A patch of visual static that seemed to hurt the eyes. It was a shimmering, oily patch of nothing that seemed to absorb the light and the very detail of the stone beneath it, making the ancient rock look smooth, featureless, and unreal. It was a glitch in the canvas of the world. My God, Alara whispered, her scientific composure cracking. It's not just erasing the seal. It's erasing the idea of the seal. Sensors cannot resolve the target's physical properties, Valeria reported, her rifle raised but not aimed. It is registering as a data vacuum. A hole in the information field. I cannot target what my systems cannot define. Yoruichi's golden eyes narrowed to slits, her spiritual sense, which could track the faintest flicker of a soul across miles, was drawing a complete blank. There's nothing there. No Raryoku. No life force. No spiritual pressure. It's hollow. But not a hollow. It's the absence of a soul itself. It feels like forgetting. Naruto stepped forward, his own divine senses reaching out. The void leech had felt hungry, malevolent, a predator. This felt cold, indifferent. It was not a creature, it was a process. A form of cosmic decay. He could feel its intent, a silent, insidious whisper against the golden lattice of the barrier. You are not real. Your rules are not real. Your history is not real. Unknow. Unbecome. It was a thing of pure entropy, an agent of non-existence. As he drew closer, the stain seemed to react to his potent, divine presence. It pulsed, a silent ripple of non-energy spreading out from it in a perfect, expanding circle. It was not an attack. It was a broadcast. And for the four beings closest to it, reality buckled. The world of the shrine, of the valley, of their strange alliance, vanished, replaced by the sharp, cruel sting of their deepest failures. For Yoruichi, the world became the cold, sterile chamber of Central 46. She was younger, her captain's Haori still new on her shoulders. Before her stood Kazuki Urahara, his usual lazy smile gone. Replaced by a grim resignation. Next to him, Tessai Tsukubishi stood bound in Kido chains. The verdict was being read, a litany of false accusations and political maneuvering. Exile. She could feel the rage, the burning, helpless fury of knowing the truth but being utterly powerless to stop the machine of the Soul Society from grinding her friends into the dust. She could feel her own feet. Rooted to the spot, unable to draw her blade, unable to act, trapped by the very laws she had sworn to uphold. It was her greatest failure. A moment when her legendary speed meant nothing, a moment of absolute soul-crushing inaction. For Alara, the world was fire. The air was thick with the smoke of burning vellum and ancient parchment. She was standing in the great library of the Argent Spire. Her own personal sanctuary, the repository of 1,000 generations of arcane knowledge. But flames, a brilliant, heretical orange, were consuming everything. A rival archmage, a man she had deemed intellectually inferior, had bypassed her wards with a brutish, clever piece of elemental sorcery. She could hear the screams of the book wardens, the sound of collapsing shelves, the final sizzling death of irreplaceable knowledge. She remembered the choice she had faced. Save the people, or save the scrolls. She had tried to do both, and in her arrogance, she had failed at both. It was the one equation she could not solve, the one variable she had not accounted for: her own hubris. For Valeria, there was no scene, only sensation. The world was the cold, sterile Y.T. of a Velez Corporation cybernetics lab. The smell of antiseptic and ozone. The high-pitched whine of a bone saw and the searing heat of a laser scalpel. She could feel the phantom sensation of her own flesh being peeled back. Of her organic eye being scooped from its socket, of the cold, hard reality of the cybernetic replacement being socketed into her skull. She was strapped to the table, not by force, but by her own will. She had chosen this. This was the final upgrade, the one that would make her the perfect soldier. She remembered the lead surgeon's words, his voice devoid of pity: "The emotional dampeners are now online. You won't be troubled by fear or doubt anymore, Kestrel." And in that moment, she had felt the last vestiges of the frightened orphan girl she had once been flicker and die, replaced by the cold, efficient logic of the machine. It was not a violation. It was a suicide. And for Sasuke, who stood furthest back, whose own soul was a raw, open wound, the effect was catastrophic. The world dissolved into the Uchiha compound on that terrible night. The moon was a bloody, unforgiving red. He was a child again, small and terrified. But he was also the man he had become. Standing over the bodies of his parents, his Mangekyo Sharingan spinning in his eyes, the blade of his Kusanagi dripping with their blood. The vision twisted, merging his own crimes with his brother's. He saw Itachi, not as a monster, but as a weeping boy, forced into an impossible choice. He saw his own quest for vengeance, a path that had led him to kill his own brother, to betray his only friend, to desire the destruction of his own home. He saw every wrong turn, every life he had snuffed out, every bond he had severed. Without the power of his dujutsu to shield his mind, without the armor of his hatred to protect his heart, the full, crushing weight of his life's sins fell upon him at once. A scream tore itself from Sasuke's throat, a raw, ragged sound of pure, undiluted agony. That shattered the valley's unnatural silence. The sound broke the spell. Naruto, who had been buffeted by the psychic wave but not ensnared, his divine consciousness too vast and too stable to be trapped by a single memory of failure, was snapped back to the present by his friend's cry. He saw the others, frozen in place, their eyes wide and unfocused, lost in their own personal hells. No, he roared. A sound that was both his and Kurama's. It was not a roar of anger, but of defiance. A roar of pure, absolute presence. He slammed his palms together, not in a hand seal for a jutsu, but in a gesture of focus. He closed his eyes and reached inward, not for power, but for his core, for the unshakable truth of his own existence. I am Naruto Uzumaki. I am Kurama. I am the son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. I am the friend of Sasuke Uchiha. I am here, now. He channeled that certainty, that simple, powerful statement of being, and pushed it outward. It was not a wave of force. It was a wave of pure, golden warmth. A pulse of absolute reality. It was the feeling of a hand on the shoulder, the sound of a familiar voice, the certainty of the sun rising after a long, dark night. The warmth washed over them. And the phantoms dissolved. Yoruichi gasped, stumbling back, her hand flying to her chest, the memory of her powerlessness a cold ghost in her heart. Alara flinched, the smell of smoke vanishing from her nostrils, leaving only the clean scent of the mist-dampened air. Valeria's rifle lowered an inch, her breathing momentarily ragged, the phantom pain of the laser scalpel fading. They all turned to Sasuke, who had collapsed to his knees, his body racked with shuddering sobs. He was clutching his head, his face a mask of horror and self-loathing. Naruto was at his side in an instant, a hand on his shoulder. He didn't offer words of comfort. He simply anchored him, his steady presence a shield against the tidal wave of guilt that threatened to drown his friend. What was that? Yoruichi asked, her voice a strained whisper. The experience had shaken her to her core. Her usual, flirtatious confidence was gone, replaced by a grim, cold fury. Whatever this thing was, It had reached inside her and touched something she had buried for a century. It had made her feel weak, and Yoruichi Shihōin did not tolerate being made to feel weak. It's a psychic contagion, Alara said, her voice trembling slightly, though her mind was already working, analyzing, categorizing. It doesn't attack the body or the soul. It attacks the narrative, the personal history that defines our consciousness. It weaponizes regret. A memory killer, Valeria stated, her voice flat, but her optical sensors were now glowing with a dangerous, red light. Her threat analysis protocols had been updated. This was not a target to be contained. This was a cancer to be excised. They all looked back at the stain on the Torii gate. It was still there, shimmering, indifferent. It had shown them their deepest weaknesses. Their most painful memories, and it had nearly broken them without moving an inch. We can't fight it head on, Naruto said, his voice low and firm. He helped Sasuke to his feet, supporting his friend's weight. It wants us to engage with it on that level. It wants us to drown in our own pasts. We have to fight it with what it's trying to erase. We have to fight it with the here and now. He looked at the shrine, at the glowing seals that covered its ancient wood. Alara, you've been studying the Fuinjutsu. What is the core principle? Alara's mind, sharp as a diamond, immediately grasped his meaning. Balance, she replied, her confidence returning as she retreated into the familiar territory of logic and theory. And definition. The seals do not create power, they define reality. The barrier seal, for instance, doesn't just block things. It creates a conceptual statement. That which is outside, shall remain outside. That which is inside, is protected. This entity is attacking that very definition with its own concept. Nothing is real. So we have to make a stronger argument, Naruto concluded, his golden eyes blazing with understanding. Quote, we have to reassert the shrine's reality, so powerfully that it overwrites this nothing. A counter-frequency, Valeria added, her tactical mind instantly seeing her role. The psychic assault was broadcast on a specific quantum frequency. If I can isolate it, I can project a disruptive counter-wave. It won't destroy the entity, but it should shield our minds from its primary weapon, giving you an opening. And what do I do? Yoruichi asked, a dangerous grin returning to her face. I can't punch a memory. No, Naruto said, meeting her gaze. You're our failsafe. If this thing has a physical form, if it manifests something we can hit, you're the only one fast enough to react before it can overwhelm us. You're our blade. The plan was audacious, desperate, and based on a synergy of their impossible, contradictory disciplines: magic, technology, soul reaping, and the divine will of the Uzumaki seals. It was a language none of them could have spoken alone, but together, they just be able to write a sentence powerful enough to save their sanctuary. Sasuke, Naruto said, turning to his friend. I need you to go back to the shrine. Stay by the hearth. Focus on the fire. Focus on the stone. Stay grounded in the here and now. Don't let it pull you back. For a moment, Sasuke's pride warred with the raw terror of what he had just experienced. But he saw the absolute seriousness in Naruto's eyes. This wasn't about protecting him. It was a strategic necessity. He was a liability in this fight, his mind too fragile, his soul too scarred. He gave a jerky, reluctant nod and retreated, his steps unsteady. Back toward the comforting warmth of the shrine. The four of them turned back to the Torii gate. The stain had grown. It was larger now, the edges beginning to drip and run down the ancient stone like thick, black, light-devouring paint. The air grew colder, and a low, whispering sound began to fill the air, a chorus of their own voices, speaking their own deepest fears. You left them to die. Yoruichi. All that knowledge turned to ash because of your pride, Alara. You paid them to erase the little girl you were, Valeria. They're all dead because of you. Naruto. Everyone you ever swore to protect. Now, Valeria commanded. Her rifle, instead of being aimed at the gate, was pointed at the ground. She fired. It did not release a bolt of plasma, but a wave of pale blue sonic energy that spread through the ground and the air, a precisely modulated frequency that felt like a clear, cold bell ringing in their minds, disrupting the insidious whispers. Alara was already moving. The foundational matrix is a trinity of concepts. She called out, her voice a sharp, Clear incantation over the hum of Valeria's disruptor. Stability, warding, and sanctity. Naruto, you must channel your power through those 3 anchor points in sequence. She pointed with her staff to 3 specific, glowing runes on the Torii gate. Naruto didn't hesitate. He took a deep breath, drawing in the very life force of the valley. He became the conduit, the heart of the shrine's ancient fuinjutsu. He placed his hand on the first rune, the symbol for stability. This ground is firm, he declared, his voice booming with a power that was both his and the shrine's. A wave of brilliant gold light erupted from the rune, spreading through the entire barrier, reinforcing its structure, solidifying its existence. The flickering in the matrix ceased. The stain on the gate recoiled, pulling back from the surge of positive reality. It began to coalesce, to take form. It was not a monster of flesh and bone, but a tear in the world, a humanoid-shaped hole in space, and through that hole, they could see things. A hand made of weeping eyes. A leg that was a swirl of dying galaxies. A face that was a constantly shifting collage of their own faces, contorted in agony. It's manifesting. Yoruichi snarled, her body tensing, wreathed in the white lightning of her shunko. The second anchor. Alara screamed. Naruto moved his hand to the second rune, the symbol for warding. This place is a shield. He yelled, pouring his will into the seal. A second wave of energy, this one a shimmering diamond bright silver, pulsed outward, layering over the gold. This was the concept of separation, of defining the inside from the outside. The creature of nothingness shrieked. A sound that was made of tearing paper and breaking glass. It lashed out with an arm made of swirling, silent screams, a limb of pure despair. But Yoruichi was already there. She met the attack not with a block, but with a diversion. Her shunko-clad fist struck the side of the limb, not trying to injure the uninjurable, but using its own momentum to redirect it, sending the arm of despair smashing harmlessly into the cliff face, where it unmade a chunk of solid rock without a sound. The last one. Naruto. Now. Naruto slammed his palm onto the final rune, the symbol for sanctity. This was the most powerful, the most abstract concept. It was the idea of holiness, of a place that was not just protected, but blessed. He didn't just channel his power. He poured his very soul into the word. This home is sacred. The final wave of energy was not gold or silver. It was pure, blinding white light, the color of creation itself. It was not an attack. It was a statement. An undeniable, absolute truth. The light washed over the glitch creature. It did not explode or burn. It simply could not exist in the face of such absolute, defined reality. The screaming faces, the dying galaxies, the weeping eyes, they were all overridden by the simple, powerful concept of a sacred home. The stain on the Torii gate vanished, the last patch of oily nothingness dissolving like a bad dream in the morning light. The golden lines of the Fuinjutsu matrix glowed, steady, whole, and brighter than before. Silence returned to the valley. The whispers were gone. The cold had vanished. The air was clean again. They had won. Naruto slumped against the Torii gate, his body trembling from the sheer amount of will he had just exerted. Yoruichi landed beside him, her shunko dissipating, her breath coming in ragged pants. Alara leaned heavily on her staff, her face pale with exhaustion. Valeria's rifle powered down with a low hum, its energy cell nearly depleted. They had faced a creature that attacked the very concept of who they were. And they had answered it by defining, together, what they would become, the protectors of this new, impossible home. Yoruichi looked at Naruto, then at the other two. Her usual smirk was absent, replaced by a look of fierce, grudging camaraderie. She walked over to Naruto and, instead of her usual flirtatious teasing, she simply placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solid, unqualified support. Not bad, Crimson, she said, her voice low and rough with exhaustion. Not bad at all. The age of monsters was over. The age of whispers had begun. And they had just survived its first terrible question. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Architecture of Peace. The silence that followed the unmaking of the unknowing was heavier and far more profound than the that had first greeted them in the valley. It was a silence born not of peace, but of shared, soul-deep exhaustion. The adrenaline of battle, the sharp focus of imminent doom, all of it evaporated, leaving behind a hollow ringing ache in the spaces where their deepest fears had been touched and twisted. The steady, golden light of the restored Fuinjutsu matrix seemed almost too bright, an affront to the gray, phantom-haunted landscape of their inner worlds. They did not congratulate each other. There were no victory cries. The triumph was a bitter one, a successful surgery that had left the patient scarred and trembling. By unspoken consensus, they drew apart, retreating from the victorious ground of the Torii Gate like a tide receding from the shore, each drawn back into the solitary ocean of their own self. Naruto's first and only priority was Sasuke. He guided his friend, who was still trembling, his face a bloodless mask of remembered horror, back into the main hall of the shrine. He settled him on a woven mat near the hearth, the fire he'd created hours before now a bed of softly glowing embers. Sasuke huddled there, wrapping his arms around himself, his gaze fixed on the dying light. His body present in the warm, cedar-scented room, but his mind still trapped in the blood-soaked streets of his memory. Naruto didn't speak. Platitudes were useless against the kind of wound Sasuke had just suffered. To say it wasn't real would be a lie. The pain, the guilt, the self-loathing, they were the most real things in Sasuke's world. So Naruto simply sat beside him, a silent, steady presence. He reached out with his divine energy, not to heal or to purge, but to offer a simple, quiet warmth, a counter-frequency to the chilling echo of the void. He became an anchor, a solid, unwavering point of reference in the here and now, a silent declaration that the past was a ghost, but the friend beside him was real. Valeria was the first to leave the hall. Her movements were stiff, her usual mechanical efficiency disrupted by a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor in her hands. She marched to her designated room, the small, defensible chamber with a clear line of sight to the exits. The door slid shut with a soft click, and the room was plunged into darkness. She stood in the center of the floor for 3 full minutes, her systems running a frantic, looping diagnostic. Psychic intrusion detected. Memory cache compromised. Emotional dampeners bypassed. The memory of the laser scalpel, the phantom pain, the cold finality of her own choice, it was a corrupted piece of data that her logic processors could not delete. It was no longer just a memory, it was a feeling. And feeling was a tactical liability. Her directive was to regain control. She initiated a hard reboot of her non-essential cognitive functions, a brutal, internal process of shutting down and restarting that was the cybernetic equivalent of a scream held back until the throat was raw. Alara swept past the hearth without a word, her regal posture a rigid shield for the turmoil within. She did not return to the archives. The thought of deciphering the serene, logical language of the seals felt a mockery after she had been so thoroughly undone by a force that defied all logic. Instead, she sought the highest point of the shrine, a small, open-air balcony on the second floor that overlooked the entire valley. The cool, damp air was a welcome shock to her system, a tether to the physical world. The unknowing had attacked her with her greatest intellectual failure, the burning of the library, but the true wound was deeper. It had shown her that for all her knowledge, for all her mastery of the universe's laws, there were things in the cosmos that were simply, terrifyingly, mad. It had introduced a variable of pure, nihilistic chaos into her perfect, ordered equation of reality, and the thought that her intellect was not a sufficient shield against it was a terror beyond any physical threat. She clutched the crystal of her staff, its familiar, cold reality a small comfort, and began the arduous process of rebuilding the shattered fortress of her own mind. Yoruichi simply vanished. One moment she was standing in the hall, her face a thunderous mask of cold fury, the next she was gone. She had processed the immediate shock of the psychic attack with a warrior's discipline, but now, in the aftermath, the ghost of her powerlessness was a venom in her veins. She reappeared in the training ground behind the shrine, the small canyon with its roaring waterfall. She needed noise, impact, the familiar language of violence to drown out the silent scream of her own memory. With a roar that was pure, cathartic rage, she unleashed her shunko, the vortex of white lightning erupting around her with a violence she hadn't called upon in decades. She did not attack an imagined foe. She attacked the world itself. She moved, a blur of incandescent fury, her fists and feet striking the canyon walls, the packed earth, the surface of the plunge pool. Each impact was a thunderclap, a localized explosion of force and spiritual pressure that sent shockwaves through the valley and blasted craters into the ancient stone. It was a tantrum of divine proportions, a goddess raging against the memory of a moment when she had been all too human. The valley, which had been their sanctuary, was now a house of haunted spirits. Each locked in a silent, solitary battle with their own ghosts. And in the center of it all, Naruto sat, the still point of the turning world, his warmth a silent tea offering to the one soul he could physically reach. Hours passed. The embers in the hearth faded to gray ash. The soft, diffused light of the valley began to dim as the unseen sun outside began its descent. The silence in the main hall was broken only by the ragged, uneven rhythm of Sasuke's breathing. Finally, Sasuke stirred. He looked at his own hands, then at the dead fire, then at Naruto. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. But the frantic terror within them had subsided, replaced by a vast, desolate emptiness. It showed me everything, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Every person I've killed. Every mistake. It made me hold the knife that killed my parents. It made me feel the joy I felt when I thought I had finally surpassed Itachi. He choked on the last words, a wave of self-loathing washing over him. How do you live with that, Naruto? After everything I've done, everything I've been, how can you even stand to be near me? Naruto was silent for a long moment. He looked at Sasuke, his golden eyes holding no judgment, only a deep, weary empathy. Because I saw it too, Naruto replied, his voice a low rumble. Not in a vision like yours. But I've lived with it. I live, Ed, with a monster inside me that had killed my parents, that had destroyed the village, that everyone hated and feared. I lived with their whispers, their glares. I lived with the loneliness. And when we fought, Sasuke, when we were tearing each other apart in that valley, I understood your pain. Your rage. It felt familiar. He held up his hand, a soft, crimson gold light swirling around his fingers. This power, it's not just Kurama's. It's mine. It's my mother's. It's my father's. It's the hope of everyone who ever believed in me. But it's also the rage of a tailed beast that was hunted and caged. It's the loneliness of 1,000 years. It's all of it. Good and bad. Light and dark. It's about balance. He looked Sasuke directly in the eyes. You can't erase what you've done. The stain is there. But you don't have to let it be the only thing you are. You're not just the Avenger. You're not just the traitor. You're Sasuke. My friend. That's the part you've been trying to kill for years. And it's the only part that can save you now. He offered no forgiveness, no easy absolution. He offered something far more difficult and far more valuable, a truth to hold on to. He acknowledged the darkness, but he refused to let it be the entire story. Sasuke stared at him, the words sinking in. For years, he had been running from his past by trying to destroy it. Naruto was suggesting something else entirely. To accept it, to carry it, and to build something new alongside it. The idea was terrifying, exhausting, and for the first time, it felt like a path that didn't end in a bloody, self-destructive oblivion. A single, hot tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. It was not a tear of rage or of sorrow, but of a fragile, terrifying, and utterly profound release. The sun had set. The valley was now lit by the soft, silver glow of the moon filtering through the barrier and the steady, golden light of the Fuinjutsu matrix. Yoruichi lay on her back in a crater of her own making. Her shunko long since dissipated. Her body ached, her spiritual energy was nearly depleted, and her knuckles were raw. But the cold fire of her rage had been banked. She stared up at the canopy of leaves. A dark lattice against the moonlit sky. Her memory had not been of a great battle lost, or a moment of physical weakness. It had been a moment of political and systemic failure. A failure of her own conviction. She had been fast enough to save Urahara and Tessai from their captors, to spirit them away to the human world. But she had not been strong enough to face down the system itself. To expose the truth and clear their names. She had chosen flight over fight, exile over justice. And that choice, that moment of perceived cowardice, was the deepest scar on her warrior's soul. A flicker of crimson and gold caught her eye. Naruto was standing at the edge of the crater, looking down at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He held out a hand. Are you done trying to level my backyard? He asked. his voice laced with a gentle, weary humor. Yoruichi let out a short, harsh laugh. She took his hand, and he pulled her effortlessly to her feet. Just redecorating, she quipped. Her usual wit returning, though it was strained. This place needed a woman's touch. They stood in silence for a moment, the roar of the waterfall a constant, soothing presence. Are you all right? He asked. Peachy. She lied. She then sighed, the bravado falling away. No. That thing. It knew exactly where to stick the knife. She looked away, towards the waterfall. It showed me the day I failed my friends. The day I ran instead of fighting for them. You saved them, Naruto corrected her gently. You got them out. That's not failure. That's choosing your people over the rules. I know a little something about that. Yoruichi turned back to him, a surprised, appraising look in her golden eyes. He wasn't trying to comfort her. He was validating her choice, reframing her greatest shame as an act of loyalty. It was a perspective she had never allowed herself to consider. You're a strange one, Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her voice a low murmur. She took a step closer, her gaze intense. You have the power of a god, but the heart of a stray dog that keeps picking up other strays. She reached up and gently touched the healing cut on his cheek, a remnant of their spar. Her touch was surprisingly soft. Most people with your kind of power want to be worshipped. Or feared. All you seem to want is to build a home. Her attraction to him, which had begun as a fascinate Ion with his power and a physical appreciation of his new form, was changing. It was deepening into something more complex. She was drawn to his stability, his unwavering moral center. In a life defined by chaos, betrayal, and the shifting loyalties of the Seraite, he was a fixed point. He was a force that didn't just win battles, he created sanctuaries. And for a soul that had been in exile for a century, the concept of a true sanctuary was a lure more powerful than any physical desire. A home is no good if you're the only one in it, he replied simply, his honesty cutting through her usual layers of irony and flirtation. The moment was broken by a low, mechanical hum. A small, sleek drone, no bigger than Naruto's hand, descended from the sky, hovering silently between them. A beam of blue light shot from the drone to the ground, and a pile of metallic components materialized on the mossy earth. It seems our resident soldier is rearming, Yoruichi commented, her mood lightening slightly. They found Valeria in the main clearing, surrounded by a complex array of technology she had teleported down from her ship. She was no longer cleaning her rifle. She was upgrading the valley's defenses. With a series of precise economic movements, she was integrating her advanced Velez Corporation technology with the shrine's ancient fuinjutsu. She was planting small, nearly invisible sensor nodes at the base of the trees. Their power cells drawing ambient energy directly from the valley's life force, a trick she had somehow reverse-engineered from observing Naruto's own connection to the place. What are you doing? Naruto asked. Improving our security, she replied without looking up, her hands moving with deft precision as she calibrated a sensor array. The fuinjutsu barrier is a formidable static defense against external threats. But it provides no early warning data, and it is vulnerable to conceptual attacks, as we have seen. I am integrating a multi-spectrum sensor grid that will monitor quantum, psychic, and thaumaturgic frequencies. It will be powered by the shrine's own energy, making it self-sustaining. The next time something tries to whisper at our door, we will have a 30-minute warning and a full data profile of the threat. It was her way of coping. When her own mind had been compromised, her solution was to build a better mind for their home. She was taking the chaos they had experienced and imposing order upon it, one circuit and power conduit at a time. It was the most Valeria thing she could possibly have done. As they watched her work, Alara descended from the shrine. A stack of scrolls held carefully in her arms. Her face was pale, but the manic, haunted look was gone, replaced by a cold, burning intensity. I have the answer, she announced. Her voice resonating with the thrill of discovery. The unknowing was an ontological weapon. We countered it with a declaration of reality. But that is a reactive measure. We need a proactive one. We need a ward of conceptual integrity. She unrolled a scroll on a flat rock. It was covered in Uzumaki seals, but in the margins, she had added her own, spidery notes, written in the glowing blue ink of the ether. The Uzumaki seals define reality. My magic can manipulate the energy that underpins it. If we can combine the two, if we can weave a spell matrix that actively and perpetually br. Ode casts the truth of this valley, its physical laws, its history, its state of being, we can create a field where a conceptual weapon like the unknowing simply cannot gain purchase. It would be like trying to run a program in an incompatible operating system. The attack would not be blocked, it would simply fail to execute. She looked at Naruto, her winter sky eyes blazing with an intellectual fire that was as passionate as any physical desire. I need your help. I can build the magical framework, but I need you to be the anchor. I need you to channel the shrine's conceptual truth into my spell. This was her way of healing. She was taking the incomprehensible madness that had terrified her and was building a cage of pure logic to contain it. She was turning her fear into a new, hybrid form of science. Her fascination with Naruto had evolved. He was no longer just a subject to be studied. He was the key, the missing variable that could unlock a new, higher form of her own art. He was her collaborator in the greatest intellectual pursuit of her life. And so the architecture of their new piece began to take shape. It was built by a soldier laying down a perimeter of data, a scholar weaving a shield of logic, a warrior standing guard with rediscovered purpose, and a friend offering a silent, steady presence in the dark. Later that night, the four of them found themselves gathered once more in the main hall. The fire had been rekindled, its flames now bright and cheerful, casting dancing shadows on the ancient wood. In the center of the room, on a low table, was a meal. Naruto, using the preserved grains and vegetables he'd found in the shrine's pantry and a fish he'd plucked from the river with a simple tendril of golden energy, had cooked. It was a simple, rustic stew, but it was hot, nourishing, and real. Sasuke was there, sitting quietly, eating slowly, as if rediscovering the simple act of tasting food. Valeria was methodically consuming a bowl, her internal answers analyzing its nutritional content while some deeper, unprogrammed part of her simply registered it as good. Alara, a scroll open beside her, was eating with a distracted air, but eating nonetheless. Grounding herself in the physical act. Yoruichi, lounging by the fire like a great cat, was eating with a hearty appetite, her earlier rage now sublimated into a deep, physical hunger. The silence was different now. It was not the tense, hostile silence of the cave, nor the traumatized, fractured silence of the bottle's aftermath. It was a comfortable silence, the quiet understanding of people who had been through a crucible together and had found their own ways to begin healing. You know, Yoruichi said, breaking the quiet, her voice a low, amused purr. For a newborn fox god, you make a surprisingly decent stew. Alara looked up from her scroll. The nutrient and flavor profiles are optimally balanced. It is an efficient and effective delivery system for sustenance. It was, for her, the highest of culinary compliments. Affirmative, Valeria added, finishing her bowl. Caloric content is sufficient for post-combat recovery. Naruto looked at the three women, at their strange, in-character compliments. He looked at Sasuke, who offered him a small, almost imperceptible nod of thanks. A genuine smile spread across his face, lighting up his golden eyes. He was a being of divine power. An anomaly that had drawn powerful, broken people from across the multiverse to his side. He was surrounded by a Soul Reaper princess, a master archmage, and a cyborg super soldier. His best friend was a depowered Uchiha grappling with a lifetime of sin. It was an impossible, ridiculous, and deeply fractured group of people. But as he looked at them, gathered around his fire, in his ancestral home, sharing a meal he had made, he felt a profound sense of rightness. This was not the future he had ever imagined for himself. It was better. It was real. This was his home. These were his people. And he would protect them. Not just from the monsters and the whispers that lurked outside the barrier, but from the ghosts that haunted them from within. That was his new mission. That was his new ninja way. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Weight of a Name. The dawn that broke over the hidden valley was a thing of quiet, pearlescent beauty. The barrier around them transmuted the sun's first rays into a soft, silver gold wash that painted the mist clinging to the river and made the dewdrops on the ancient trees glitter like scattered diamonds. The air, scrubbed clean by the storm and the subsequent psychic battle, was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of wet stone, damp earth, and the faint, clean perfume of some unseen night-blooming flower. It was a morning that felt like a fresh start. A clean page waiting to be written upon. Inside the shrine, a new rhythm had established itself, an unspoken choreography of purpose. The trauma of the previous night was not gone, it lingered. D is a subtle shadow in the set of their shoulders, a new watchfulness in their eyes, but it had been packed away, compartmentalized by the sheer force of their respective wills. Survival demanded function, and each of them had found a function to cling to. Naruto was the first to rise, finding a strange solace in the simple, domestic act of restarting the fire in the hearth. The physical reality of it, the rough texture of the wood, the puff of ash, the blossoming warmth, was a comforting anchor. He moved with a quiet economy, his divine power now so integrated into his being that it felt as natural as breathing. He found Valeria already at work in the main clearing. She had established a small, efficient workstation near the Torii gate, a series of holographic displays shimmering in the morning air around her, projecting complex data streams and topographical maps of the valley. She was not just installing sensors, she was weaving a nervous system for their sanctuary, a web of pure info. Machine that would serve as their eyes and ears. She acknowledged his presence with a curt nod, her focus absolute, her hands moving with the dizzying precision of a master surgeon. He found Alara in the archives. Though she was not reading. She had several scrolls unrolled on a large table, but she was staring at a blank piece of parchment, her crystalline staff leaning against the table beside her. She was not idle. He could feel the immense, silent weight of her concentration, a palpable pressure in the room. She was drafting the foundational equations for their conceptual ward, building arcane architecture in her mind before daring to commit a single, flawed rune to the page. And he found Yoruichi on the roof of the shrine, sitting cross-legged at its highest peak, her eyes closed, her posture one of perfect, relaxed meditation. But it was not a peaceful meditation. He could sense the fine control she was exerting over the tempest of her own spiritual pressure, forcing the chaotic, rage-fueled energy from the night before back into its disciplined channels. She was sharpening her blade, honing the edge that had been blunted by the psychic assault. Only Sasuke was still in the main hall, sitting where Naruto had left him. He had not slept. But the hollow, haunted look was gone, replaced by a still, quiet intensity. He was watching the others, his dark, human eyes tracking their movements, analyzing their actions. The Sharingan was gone, but the mind of an Uchiha, a mind trained from birth to deconstruct, to analyze, to see the patterns beneath the surface, remained. Naruto brought him a cup of hot, herb-infused water from the shrine's well. Sasuke took it, his fingers wrapping around the warm ceramic. They're all preparing for the next one, Sasuke said, his voice a low rasp. It was not a question. They are, Naruto affirmed, sitting beside him. We can't let what happened last night happen again. That thing, it didn't use power levels or strategy, Sasuke mused, his gaze distant. It used our own history as a weapon. How do you build a defense against yourself? That's what Alara is trying to figure out, Naruto said. But she can't do it alone. None of us can. He turned to face Sasuke fully. I need you, Sasuke. Sasuke's head snapped around, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a flicker of something that might have been hope. Need me? For what? I can't fight. I can barely mold enough chakra to light a candle. I'm a liability. I'm not asking you to fight, Naruto said, his voice firm. I'm asking you to think. You have one of the sharpest strategic minds I've ever seen. You see things other people miss. The unknowing, the void leech, they were different, but they were both extra-dimensional. Valeria has the tech, Alara has the magic, Yoruichi has the speed. And I have this, he gestured to himself. We're the weapons. But we're fighting blind. I need you to be our eyes. Analyze the fights we've had. Find the patterns, the weaknesses, the strategies we missed. Be our tactician. He was not offering pity. He was offering a mission. A purpose. He was acknowledging that Sasuke's greatest weapon had never been his Sharingan or his Chidori, but the keen, cold, brilliant intellect that wielded them. For a long moment, Sasuke was silent. The offer was a lifeline, a chance to be more than the broken shell of a fallen demigod. It was a chance to use the very mind that had led him down the path of darkness for a new purpose, protection. It was a form of penance, and a path forward, all in one. I'll need the data, Sasuke said finally. His voice regaining a sliver of its old, analytical crispness. Everything Valeria's sensors recorded. Your own account of what it felt like to fight them. Alara's analysis of their properties. Everything. Naruto smiled. It was the first time Sasuke had looked forward instead of back. I'll get it for you. The weaving of the conceptual ward began at midday, when the sun was at its highest. Its light pouring into the valley like liquid gold. The chosen location was the training ground, the circular, stone-floored canyon where the natural energy was most focused. Yoruichi and Valeria stood guard at the canyon's entrance, a silent, formidable pair of sentinels. Sasuke was perched on a high ledge, a series of Valeria's holographic displays shimmering in front of him, his dark eyes scanning the data. His brow furrowed in concentration. In the center of the canyon floor, Alara had inscribed a massive, intricate circle with her own glowing, etheric runes. It was a thing of breathtaking complexity. A web of interlocking geometric shapes, astrological symbols, and flowing lines of arcane script. It was a map of reality as she understood it. This is the magical loom, she explained to Naruto. Her voice resonating with a creator's passion. It is designed to draw upon the ambient natural energy of this place, which my senses register as a raw, potent form of life force magic. My runes will shape that energy into a coherent spell matrix. She pointed to a specific, empty space in the center of the circle. But the loom needs a thread. The core concept. That is you. You must stand in the center and become the living anchor for the ward. You will not be casting a spell. You will be testifying. You must project the absolute, undeniable truth of this valley's existence into the matrix I create. Naruto nodded, his expression serious. He stepped into the circle, and the moment his feet touched the stone within it, the entire array flared with a brilliant, blue light. The air grew heavy, humming with a power that was a strange and beautiful fusion of Alara's precise, intellectual magic and the valley's wild, untamed life force. Begin with the foundation, Alara instructed. Her voice taking on the commanding tone of a master artisan. The earth beneath our feet. Project its solidity, its age, its unshakable reality. Naruto closed his eyes. He reached down with his senses. Not just to the stone of the canyon floor, but deeper, through the soil, through the bedrock, to the very bones of the earth. He felt the slow, patient, geological time, the memory of mountains rising and falling. The deep, slumbering strength of the planet itself. He did not think of the word, stability. He became stability. A wave of pure, golden energy, the color of sunlight on stone, flowed out of him. It did not explode. It seeped, flowing into the blue lines of Alara's spell matrix. The blue and gold swirled together, creating a vibrant, living turquoise. The ground beneath them all hummed, feeling. For a brief, dizzying moment, infinitely dense, infinitely real. It's working. Alara exclaimed, her usual composure lost in the thrill of creation. Now, the life upon it. The trees, the water, the air. Give them a voice. Define their vitality. Naruto's consciousness expanded. He felt the slow, patient life in the colossal trees, the endless cycle of the air flowing from the mountain to the valley and back to the sky, the very breath of the wind as it whispered through the leaves. He projected the concept of an untamed, enduring, and sacred life. A second wave of energy. This one a brilliant, verdant green, flowed from him, weaving into the turquoise matrix, creating a complex tapestry of color that seemed to shift and breathe. The very air around them grew richer, cleaner. And a handful of small, white flowers instantly bloomed in a patch of moss at the canyon's edge. The strain was immense. This was not a battle of power, but of will, of focus. He was holding the entire conceptual reality of the valley in his mind and feeding it into Alara's arcane engine. Sweat beaded on his brow, his muscles trembling. Alara felt the strain as well. She was wrestling with forces that were, by their very nature, wild and untamable, forcing them into a precise, logical structure. Her indigo robes were dark with sweat, her knuckles white where she gripped her staff. But her eyes blazed with a triumphant, ecstatic light. They were not just building a shield. They were composing a symphony, a perfect harmony of magic and divinity. The final element, she called out, her voice hoarse. The most important one. Us. Our presence here. Will to call this place home. It must be woven into the ward itself. It is not just a place, it is our place. Project Our Truth. Naruto took a deep, shuddering breath. He reached out, not to the earth or the trees, but to the people who shared this space with him. He felt Sasuke on the ledge, his sharp, analytical mind a beacon of focused thought. He felt Valeria at the entrance, her disciplined, protective will a wall of unbreachable steel. He felt Yoruichi, her fierce, loyal, and untamable spirit a blazing fire. He felt Alara, her brilliant, ordered, and insatiably curious mind a universe of its own. And he felt himself, the anchor, the heart. He gathered all of it. Their pain, their strength, their brokenness, their fierce will to survive, and he wove it into one final concept: a home. Not a place of perfect peace, but a place of refuge. A place where strays, and disasters, and anomalies could be safe. A place with a name. Sanctuary. He breathed, the word a soft declaration of absolute truth. The final wave of energy that flowed from him was not one color. It was a swirl of crimson and gold, of violet and black, of icy blue and armored gray, of the pure, clear darkness of a human soul. It was them. It was their story. It poured into the matrix, and the entire canyon was engulfed in a silent, blinding flash of pure white light. When the light faded, the runes on the ground were gone. The air was still, but something had fundamentally changed. The very atmosphere of the valley felt settled, complete. The barrier was no longer just a shield. It was a living, breathing part of the valley itself, a declaration of its own reality that was now woven into the fabric of space-time. They had not just built a wall. They had given their home a soul. Naruto collapsed to one knee, his body trembling, his energy spent. Alara swayed on her feet, leaning heavily on her staff, a look of utter, triumphant exhaustion on her face. It was Yoruichi who reached him first. She was at his side in a silent flash, her hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Easy there, Crimson," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "Don't burn yourself out. We're going to need you." She helped him to his feet, and for a moment, they just stood there, her arm supporting him, the two of them at the epicenter of the new, profound peace they had all just created. In that moment of shared exhaustion and triumph, the last of her reservations seemed to melt away. Later that night, Naruto stood on the same balcony Alara had sought out the night before, letting the cool night air wash over him. The weaving of the ward had left him drained, but it was a good, clean exhaustion, the feeling of a hard day's work well done. The moon was high and full, its light pristine and clear now, unfiltered by the old, stormy atmosphere. "Nice view." Yoruichi's voice came from right beside him. He hadn't heard her approach. She was leaning on the balcony rail, her violet hair a river of dark silk in the moonlight. She was dressed simply, in the black pants of her old uniform and a light, sleeveless top, her usual bravado replaced by a quiet, contemplative air. "The best in the house," he agreed. They were silent for a time, looking out at the silvered valley, at the dark, sleeping shapes of the great trees. "Sanctuary," she said softly. "You gave it a name. It felt right," he said. "It's what this place is. For all of us." "It is," she agreed. She turned to face him, her golden eyes seeming to glow in the darkness. "We make a good team, you know. When we're not trying to kill each other or having our minds ripped apart by things that shouldn't exist." "We do," he said, a small smile touching his lips. She took a step closer, her playful smirk making a tentative return. "You know, back in the Soul Society, when a man and a woman build a home together, there's usually a next step." The implication was as clear and direct as a blade to the throat. His smile faltered, replaced by a look of surprise. The part of him that was still the awkward, flustered boy from Konoha wanted to blush and stammer. But the divine consciousness within him, the part that had seen the rise and fall of ages through Kurama's eyes, simply met her gaze, his own golden eyes steady and searching. He saw the challenge in her eyes, the flirtatious spark. But beneath it, he saw something else. He saw the warrior who had been in exile for a century, the woman who had lived a life of transience and danger, looking for a place to finally, truly be at rest. He saw her loyalty, her ferocity, her hidden vulnerability. And he saw that her offer, couched in the language of playful seduction, was utterly, profoundly serious. She was offering him a partnership, an alliance of the soul. Yoruichi. He began, not sure what he was going to say. She silenced him by placing a finger on his lips. Don't answer now, she whispered, her voice a low, husky purr. I'm a patient woman. Most of the time. Just think about it. She leaned in, and for a heart-stopping second, he thought she was going to kiss him. Instead, she kissed him gently on the cheek, her lips soft and warm. Get some rest, Crimson. You earned it. With that, she was gone, a flicker of shadow, leaving him alone on the balcony, the touch of her lips a phantom warmth on his skin. His mind reeling with a possibility he had never, in his wildest dreams, considered. It was in that quiet, contemplative moment that a single, clear, musical chime echoed through the silent valley. It was not a sound of nature. It was a sound of technology. An alert. He was in the main clearing in an instant. Valeria was already there, a holographic map of the multiverse, a chaotic, swirling storm of colored energy streams, projected in front of her. A single, pulsing red dot was visible at the very edge of the map. What is it? He asked. The new sensor net just picked it up, Valeria reported. Her voice laced with a new and unfamiliar tone, professional curiosity. It's not an incursion. It's a signal. A tightly focused, repeating, multi-dimensional transmission. It is encoded with mathematical proofs and linguistic primers. It is a greeting. Sasuke, Yoruichi, and Alara arrived, drawn by the chime. They all stared at the blinking red dot on the cosmic map. The Void Leech had been a mindless scavenger. The unknowing had been an indifferent cancer. This was different. This was deliberate, intelligent. A greeting? Yoruichi asked, crossing her arms. From who? Valeria's fingers danced across her console, decoding the signal's point of origin. A string of alien symbols resolved into a name that her translation software struggled with, of faring the closest phonetic approximation. The signal originates from a mobile deep space armada, she stated, her voice flat, but the information was a thunderclap. They call themselves the Architects. The red dot on the map pulsed again, a steady, patient, and utterly confident heartbeat in the vast, dark ocean of the multiverse. They were no longer just hiding. They had been found. And they had just received a knock on the door. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Socratic Method of a Starship. The chime did not repeat. It hung in the cool night air of the valley, a single, perfect, and profoundly alien note that had irrevocably altered the nature of their reality. Before the chime, they were survivors, hiding from a hostile and chaotic multiverse. After the chime, they were a destination. They had been found. The holographic map shimmering before Valeria was the new center of their universe. The blinking red dot, a steady and patient pulse from the unfathomable darkness between dimensions, was a question mark that dwarfed every other concern. Run it again. Sasuke's voice was sharp, cutting through the initial shock. He had moved to Valeria's side, his dark eyes scanning the data streams with an intensity that seemed to physically pierce the holographic light. Signal strength, encryption complexity, transmission medium. Is there any data degradation? Any sign of a brute force entry through the barrier? Negative, Valeria replied, her fingers a blur across her console. The cybernetic soldier and the powerless tactician were in their element, speaking the cold, clear language of data and threat assessment. The signal is not penetrating the conceptual ward. It is resonating with it. Like a tuning fork held next to a crystal glass. The transmission is flawless, a zero-loss data packet. Encryption is quantum entangled, orders of magnitude beyond my own systems, yet the primers they included are a universal key. It's not a code meant to be broken, it's a door they're holding open. They are supremely confident, Alara mused, her gaze fixed on the blinking dot, her mind racing. To transmit a signal of this complexity across dimensional boundaries without any loss of integrity implies a mastery over the fundamental fabric of reality that is disconcerting. They are not brute force conquerors. This is the calling card of an intelligence that views the laws of physics as a medium for communication. Or it's the prettiest damn trap I've ever seen, Yoruichi countered, her arms crossed, her expression a mask of deep, ingrained suspicion. They announce themselves, act polite. And the moment we open the door, a fleet of their warships pours through and turns this whole valley into a parking lot. The energy signature is inconsistent with a military fleet, Valeria stated. The power output is colossal, yes, but it's stable, harmonic. It's the signature of a massive, self-sustaining power source, not a collection of weapon systems on standby. It reads more like a city, or a small star, than an armada. The debate was a microcosm of their individual natures. Sasuke's paranoia, Valeria's data-driven analysis, Alara's academic awe, Yoruichi's cynical distrust. They all looked to Naruto. He was the anchor, the leader. He was the reason this signal had come to them. The final decision had to be his. Naruto stared at the blinking red dot, his divine senses reaching out, trying to feel the intent behind the signal. He could feel no malice, no hunger, no killing intent. He felt only a vast, ancient, and unnervingly patient curiosity. It was the feeling of a mountain looking down at a newly sprouted flower. We answer, he said, his voice quiet but firm, leaving no room for argument. They're not trying to break down the door. They're knocking. Leaving them on the porch would be rude. Valeria, can you open a channel? Use their own protocols. Let them know we're listening. Affirmative, Valeria said, projecting a reciprocal handshake signal. They will know we are receptive. Quote. She typed a final command. A thin, golden thread of light erupted from the sensor array she had built, shooting up into the night sky and harmlessly merging with the conceptual ward. For a moment, nothing happened. The red dot on the map continued its steady, patient blinking. Then, the world went silent. The sound of the river, the whisper of the wind, the chirp of a night cricket, all of it vanished. The air grew perfectly still. A perfect, circular section of the sky directly above the valley, about 100 yards in diameter, began to resolve. The stars did not vanish. They were pushed aside, the fabric of space itself seeming to fold back to reveal what lay beneath. It was not a ship, not in any conventional sense. It was a perfect, seamless sphere of a material that was the color of polished obsidian, a hole in the fabric of the cosmos that did not reflect the starlight, but seemed to absorb it. Upon its surface, intricate lines of silver light pulsed in a slow, hypnotic, and impossibly complex pattern, like a circuit board the size of a mountain. This was the source of the signal, one ship of the architects, and its silent effort L's arrival was a statement of power more profound than any weapon's fire. From the bottom of the sphere, a single, needle-thin beam of pure, white light descended. It did not blast the ground. It too shed the stone floor of the training ground with the delicacy of a falling feather. The light solidified, coalescing, building upon itself layer by layer, like a three-dimensional printer using light as its medium. In a matter of seconds, a figure stood where the beam had touched. It was humanoid in its basic shape, a head, a torso, 2 arms, 2 legs, but it was utterly, beautifully alien. Its body was formed from a smooth, white, ceramic-like material, its joints marked by seams of the same pulsing silver light as the ship above. It had no face, only a smooth, featureless ovoid of white. It stood perfectly still, radiating an aura of absolute calm and ancient, imperturbable intelligence. I am Monitor 734, a voice said. The voice did not come from the figure. It emanated from the air all around them, a perfect, androgynous, and completely emotionless melding of their own individual languages. It spoke Alara's arcane tongue, Yoruichi's ancient Japanese, and Valeria's Velez sector Russian simultaneously. Yet they all heard it as their own native speech. I am a proxy of the collective designated as the architects. We extend greetings to the nascent divinity and its associates. No one moved. The sheer, casual power of their arrival, the effortless display of technological and ontological mastery, was a far more effective form of intimidation than any threat. You're the ones who sent the signal, Naruto stated. Stepping forward. He was the only one who seemed completely undeterred, his own divine nature recognizing a peer, not a master. Affirmative, the monitor's voice replied. The event of your creation sent a unique, paradoxical resonance across the multiverse. Such an event, the spontaneous fusion of a mortal soul with a divine shard resulting in a stable, self-aware ontological entity, has been theorized but never observed. We were compelled to investigate. Investigate. Yoruichi's voice was sharp. That sounds a lot like dissect. In my book. Your cynicism is noted, Captain Yoruichi Shihōin. The monitor stated, and a shiver went down Yoruichi's spine as the being named her with perfect familiarity. We have no hostile intent. The architects are not conquerors. We are librarians. We observe, we catalog, we understand. The multiverse is a grand library of existence, and each unique reality, each civilization, each cosmological event, is a book. We wish only to read the story you are about to write. And what if we don't want to be read? Alara challenged, stepping forward to stand beside Naruto, her staff held firmly. All stories are read, Archmage Alara, the monitor replied. Its featureless face turning towards her. The only choice is by whom. There are other, less discerning, readers in the dark. Beings who do not borrow books, but burn them. Our presence here is, in part, a warning. Your sanctuary is no longer hidden. You have lit a fire in the deep woods, and many things are now turning their heads toward the light. A hologer. Affix display shimmered into existence in the air, projected from the monitor's chest. It showed their valley, a tiny, glowing golden dome. And from the swirling chaos of the multiverse map, a dozen other lines of interest. Some red and aggressive, some a sickly green of parasitic hunger, were beginning to snake their way towards it. This is why we have come, the monitor continued. Not to interfere, but to assess. The power you now command, Naruto Uzumaki, is the power to author reality. To write new chapters in the book of existence. Such power carries with it a commensurate responsibility. Before we offer you access to our libraries, a gesture of academic goodwill, we must ask the question we ask of all new, emergent powers of your magnitude. The holographic map vanished. The monitor's featureless face seemed to fix on Naruto, and the air grew heavy with the weight of its query. You now possess the power to impose your will upon the fabric of what is. You can heal all wounds, end all wars, eliminate all suffering. Imagine a reality of perfect peace, perfect order, where no child ever goes hungry, no heart is ever broken by loss, no soul is ever tormented by hatred. To achieve this, you need only make one small, simple alteration. You must remove the variable that creates all conflict. You must erase the capacity for true, unfettered choice. The freedom to choose wrongly. The monitor paused, letting the terrible, seductive proposition hang in the air. Would you do it? Would you trade the chaos of free will for the peace of a perfect, benevolent design? There is no correct answer. We seek only your truth. Quote. The question fell like a stone into the silent pool of the valley. It was a philosophical bomb, designed to fracture them along the fault lines of their own deepest convictions. Of course. You would, Alara said, almost immediately, her voice sharp with intellectual certainty. The argument is logically undeniable. Suffering is a negative variable. Free will is the catalyst for the chaotic application of that variable. To eliminate the catalyst is to solve the equation. A universe of perfect order, guided by a benevolent, intelligent will, would be the ultimate expression of civilization. It would be beautiful. It would be a dollhouse, Yoruichi shot back, her voice dripping with contempt. A pretty, perfect, dead thing. What's the point of a life without a struggle? Without a choice. The falls are what make the climb worthwhile. The risks are what make victory sweet. A world without heartbreak is a world without love. I'd rather live one day as a lion in a bloody, chaotic world than 1,000 years as a fat, happy sheep in your perfect cage. Valeria remained silent for a long moment, her internal processors running 1,000 ethical subroutines. The Velez Corporation's mandate was to impose order on a chaotic quadrant for the betterment of its citizens, she stated, her voice a low, troubled monotone. This was achieved by eliminating variables. Dissent, poverty, unsanctioned emotion. The result was a society that was stable, productive, and sterile. It was a system that ran perfectly, but no one within it truly lived. My OWN upgrades were a choice to sacrifice my humanity for efficiency. It was a flawed calculation. All eyes turned to Sasuke. He stood in the shadows, his face unreadable. I've seen what happens when people have too much power and too much choice, he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. Madara, Kagaya, myself. We all had a vision for a perfect world, a world without the pain we had suffered. And we were all willing to burn the real world to the ground to achieve it. He looked at Naruto, his dark eyes filled with a terrible, hard-won clarity. A world without choice is a prison. But a woe. RLD where everyone can choose anything, is chaos. The question is flawed. You can't have one without the other. They had debated. They had revealed their deepest truths. Now, the monitor's featureless face turned back to Naruto. The final answer had to come from him. Naruto took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs. He looked at his friends. At Ilara's burning desire for a perfect, logical order. At Yoruichi's fierce, untamable need for freedom. At Valeria's cold, first-hand knowledge of a soulless peace. At Sasuke's bitter understanding of the poison of absolute power. They were all right. And they were all wrong. I reject the choice, Naruto said, his voice clear and steady, resonating not with divine power, but with a simple, unshakable human certainty. The monitor did not react. Explain. You ask if I would trade chaos for peace, Naruto said. But that's a false dichotomy. You're asking me to choose between a storm and a vacuum. I won't. The point isn't to stop the storm. The point is to build a ship that is strong enough to sail through it. The point isn't to create a perfect world. It's to give the people in an imperfect world the strength, the hope, and he bonds they need to make it better themselves. He gestured to his companions. Look at us. We are chaos. A soul reaper, a mage, a cyborg, a broken shinobi, and me. We're all disasters. We've all made wrong choices. We've all suffered. And if you erased all of that, you'd erase us. You'd erase the strength we found in our failures. You'd erase the loyalty we have to each other, a loyalty that was forged in fire. He looked up at the great, silent sphere in the sky, his golden eyes blazing with a passion that was the antithesis of the architect's cold logic. My answer is this. I will not be the author of a perfect story. I will be the guardian of the library. I will use my power not to erase the choices people make, but to protect their ability to make them. And I will stand with them. And help them deal with the consequences, good or bad. The meaning of life isn't found in the destination of perfection. It's found in the messy, painful, beautiful journey we all take together. Silence. A profound, absolute silence that seemed to stretch for an eternity. The monitor stood, unmoving, its smooth, white form a vessel of pure, analytical thought. The great ship above them was a silent, black god, passing its judgment. Finally, the voice emanated from the air once more. The response is illogical. It is sentimental. It is predicated on the unquantifiable value of suboptimal emotional states. A pause. It is the most interesting answer we have received in 10 millennia. A small, crystalline data matrix, a solid object of woven light, materialized in the monitor's hand. We do not offer you a gift. We offer you a burden. This codex contains a fraction of our library. Information on 1,000 different realities, their physical laws, their dominant species, their known threats. It will help you protect your sanctuary. It will also show you the true, terrifying scale of the multiverse you now inhabit. It will show you the number of readers who will be coming for your story. The monitor placed the codex on the ground. We will observe. We will not interfere further unless another event of a similar cosmological magnitude occurs. We leave you to your story, Naruto Uzumaki. Try to write a good one. With that, the monitor dissolved back into a beam of pure, white light, which retracted into the obsidian sphere above. The section of the sky folded back in on itself, the stars sliding back into place, leaving no trace that the ship had ever been there. The sounds of the valley, the river, the wind, rushed back in to fill the silence. They were alone again. The valley no longer felt like a hidden sanctuary. It felt like a very small, very fragile island in the middle of a vast and turbulent cosmic ocean. Naruto walked over and picked up the codex. It was warm to the touch, humming with a barely contained universe of information. He looked at his friends, at the small, strange, fractured family he had gathered around him. The weight of the codex in his hand felt like the weight of 1,000 new worlds, 1,000 new threats. Later, he found himself back on the balcony, the codex resting on the railing before him, its inner light a soft, pulsing glow. The weight of his new reality was immense. He was not just a protector of a village anymore. He was the guardian of an interdimensional lighthouse, and he had just been handed the map of the entire, storm-tossed sea. He felt a presence beside him. It was Yoruichi. She didn't speak. She simply stood beside him, her warmth a comforting reality in the face of the cold, infinite cosmos. She looked at the strain on his face, at the immense burden in his eyes. She had asked him to think about her offer. But she saw now that words and questions were no longer what he needed. He didn't need more choices, more possibilities to weigh. He needed an anchor, a certainty, a reason to fight that was not an abstract philosophy, but a living, breathing reality. She reached out and took his hand. Her hand was warm, strong, and real. He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a weary surprise. "You don't have to carry it all alone, you know," she said softly, her voice devoid of its usual teasing lilt. It was just her, open, honest. She leaned in, and this time, there was no hesitation, no playful feint. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was not a kiss of fiery passion or seductive promise. It was a kiss of profound and absolute certainty. It was a kiss that said, "The multiverse can wait. The threats can wait. The cosmic questions can wait. Right now, here, in this moment, this is real. We are real. I am with you." When she pulled away, the haunted, weary look in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet, dawning sense of peace. He looked at her, at the fierce loyalty and unwavering support in her golden eyes, and he knew. This was his truth. This was his answer. This was the bond that would be his ship in the coming storm. He smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that seemed to push back the vast cosmic darkness. He squeezed her hand, his own answer unspoken but perfectly, completely understood. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The first line of a new book. Naruto did not sleep. After Yoruichi left him on the balcony, he remained there, the crystalline codex a cool, heavy weight in his hands, its internal light a soft, rhythmic pulse against his palms. He watched the moon trace its slow, silver path across the sky, his mind a silent, churning ocean. The kiss had not been a resolution, but a catalyst. It had taken the chaotic, swirling energies of his new life, the divine power, the alien threats, the fractured souls he'd gathered, and given them a focal point, a center of gravity. It was a promise of an anchor in the coming storm, and it settled his spur. It in a way that even his fusion with Kurama had not. He was still there when the first hint of dawn brushed the lip of the valley. The darkness did not flee, it softened, melting from black to a deep, velvety indigo. The stars faded, and the eastern sky ignited in a slow, silent explosion of rose and gold. He felt her presence a moment before he saw her. Yoruichi appeared at his side, not with a flicker of shunpo, but with a quiet, deliberate stride. She was dressed in fresh, simple black fatigues she'd requisitioned from Valeria's ship, the severe, tactical look a startling and compelling contrast to her usual fluid grace. She said nothing, simply leaning on the railing beside him, her shoulder brushing against his. They watched the sunrise together, a silent, shared communion. The world below them awoke. The mist on the river began to burn away, and the air filled with the scent of damp earth and the chorus of morning birds. The new day was pristine, beautiful, and utterly oblivious to the cosmic weight that now rested upon their small, hidden world. "It's too quiet," Yoruichi said finally, her voice a low murmur. "I've spent the last century on the run, moving through the back alleys of the human world. This much peace feels loud. You'll get used to it," Naruto replied, his voice equally quiet. He turned his gaze from the sunrise to her. Her golden eyes, in the soft morning light, held no trace of the flirtatious trickster or the enraged warrior. They were calm, clear, and steady. "No," she said, a faint smile touching her lips as she met his gaze. "I don't think I will. And I don't think I'd want to. A little bit of chaos is good for the soul." She tapped the codex in his hands with a single, elegant finger. "And it looks like we're about to have more than our fair share." He had made his choice last night, in the quiet moment after her kiss. She was not just a potential lover or a powerful ally. She was his partner, his equal, the one who could stand beside him and look out at the vast, terrifying darkness of the multiverse without flinching. "Then we'd better get ready for it," he said. He straightened up, the weariness of the long night replaced by a surge of clear, focused purpose. He turned and walked back into the shrine, and she fell into step beside him, a silent, unified presence. The time for reaction was over. It was time to build. They gathered in the main hall. The morning light slanting through the open doors, illuminating the swirling dust motes in the air. The fire in the hearth was blazing, a cheerful, crackling center to their tense circle. Naruto placed the architect's codex on the low, central table. Its humming, internal light seemed to absorb the firelight, pulsing with a cold, ancient knowledge. Sasuke was there, his face pale but his eyes sharp and focused. Valeria stood like a sentinel, her armor immaculate, her posture radiating a readiness that was her natural state. Alara was a pillar of indigo and silver, her expression one of intense, almost painful, intellectual hunger. The architects gave us a library, Naruto began, his voice calm and clear, filling the hall. They also gave us a warning. We're not just hiding anymore. We're on a map. And things are coming. It's time we found out what they are. He looked at the two women who represented the pinnacle of their respective sciences. Alara. Valeria. Can you open this? Safely. Its construction is a fusion of hyper-advanced technology and what I can only describe as ontological magic, Alara stated, her fingers hovering over the codex, a scholar itching to touch a forbidden text. It has no ports, no seams, no discernible interface. But it is designed to be read, Valeria added, her own optical sensors scanning the object in a cascade of blue light. The signal it emits is a constant, low-level psychic and quantum query. It is waiting for a compatible system to interface with. My ship's primary computer has the processing power, but it lacks the conceptual framework to understand the data. Archmage Alara's magic can likely interpret the framework, but she lacks the raw processing power to handle the sheer volume of information. The two women looked at each other. The rivalry that had defined their first meeting was gone, replaced by a grudging, professional respect. They were two masters of their craft, facing a problem that neither could solve alone. A symbiotic interface is required, Alara concluded. I will establish a hard light data conduit from my ship's core, Valeria said. You will need to create a stable Rick field to act as a translation matrix. A bridge between my logic and your metaphysics. It was a plan born of necessity, a fusion of worlds that was a perfect metaphor for the group itself. The process took less than an hour. Valeria deployed a series of projector nodes that filled the center of the room with a shimmering, three-dimensional cube of blue light. Alara then began her work, her NDS weaving intricate patterns in the air, her voice a low, melodic chant. Silver, glowing runes flowed from her fingertips, not onto a surface, but into the cube of light itself, arranging themselves into a complex, spherical lattice. The matrix is stable, Alara announced, sweat beading on her brow. Valeria. Now. Valeria nodded, her fingers dancing across a console. A beam of pure data, visible as a torrent of golden light, shot down from the ceiling and into the heart of the runic sphere. For a moment, the sphere pulsed violently, the blue and gold energies warring against each other. Then, with a soft, resonant hum, they synchronized. The cube of light exploded outward, filling the entire room. They were no longer in the shrine hall. They were floating in the heart of a galaxy. Nibu. Lay of every conceivable color swirled around them. The floor was a transparent map of cosmic strings, and the walls were living, moving star charts. They were inside the library. The sheer, overwhelming scale of it was a physical blow. Yoruichi let out a low whistle. Sasuke's eyes were wide, trying to take in the impossible vista. But the initial awe was quickly replaced by a dawning horror. For every vibrant, living galaxy, there was a patch of dead, gray static. For every stream of light representing a thriving civilization, there were a dozen that flickered and died as they watched. The library was also a graveyard. It's too much, Naruto said, the weight of a billion dying worlds pressing in on him. We could spend a lifetime in here and not see a fraction of it. Then we do not look. We search. Sasuke's voice cut through the awe like a shard of obsidian. He strode to the center of the holographic storm, his mind, unburdened by the need to process the raw power of the display, seeing only the patterns. Valeria. Alara. I need a filter. I don't care about civilizations or cosmic phenomena. I want threats. Cross-reference the energy signatures of every hostile entity cataloged. Isolate for trans-dimensional, ontological aggressors. Prioritize any faction whose primary methodology is consumption or erasure, not conquest. The command was sharp, precise, and utterly confident. He was no longer a broken warrior. He was the strategist, the scalpel that would find the cancer in this universe of data. The two women, grateful for the clear directive, set to work. The star charts swirled and reordered. Entire galaxies vanished, filtered out of the search. The data stream narrowed, focusing, until only a handful of terrifying entries remained. And one burned brighter and more menacingly than all the others. A single, chilling image resolved in the center of the room. It was a world, much like their own, seen from orbit. Then, a fleet of ships, shaped like jagged, crystalline shards of black ice, descended upon it. They did not fire weapons. They simply hovered. And as they did, the planet began to lose its color. The vibrant blues of the oceans, the greens and browns of the continents. All of it faded to a uniform, lifeless gray. The light of its sun was leached away, and the planet was left a dead, silent husk of ash and dust in the eternal night. Below the image, a name appeared. The architect's designation for this terrifying force. Threat designation. The Cinder Chorus. Classification. Narrative parasite ontological consumer. Methodology. The Chorus targets realities with high narrative potential, worlds with powerful heroes, unique energy systems, grand prophecies, or nascent divinities. They do not conquer. They consume the story, feeding on the conceptual energy of a reality's existence, leaving behind only the static of a story that has been erased. And then, a final, horrifying line of text appeared, a new addition to the architect's file, flagged as a Priority 1 alert. Current target. Anomaly 0, designate. Naruto Uzumaki. Probability of incursion. 97.4% within the next standard cycle. The simulation faded, leaving them back in the shrine hall. The humming cube of data now glowing with a malevolent, blood-red light. The silence in the room was absolute. They had found their next monster. And it was already on its way. Well, Yoruichi said, her voice dangerously soft. That's not good. Their methodology is their weakness, Sasuke stated, his mind already dissecting the information. He pointed to a complex waveform display that had appeared beside the main threat file. The codex indicates they initiate the erasure process by broadcasting a specific frequency of unmaking. It's a conceptual virus that destabilizes a reality's belief in its own existence. But it's a broadcast. And any broadcast can be jammed. We could create a disruptive frequency, Valeria said, her tactical mind immediately locking onto the solution. A counter wave. But to jam a fleet of that size, we would need a power source far beyond what the shrine can provide. And a jamming signal is a defense, not a victory, Alara added, her face grim. It would be like trying to hold a door against a tidal wave. Eventually, they would overwhelm us. So we don't jam the whole fleet, Yoruichi said, a feral grin spreading across her face. We find the lead singer and we cut his throat. She is correct, Sasuke affirmed. The chorus operates as a hive mind, but it is always directed by a central conductor ship. This vessel is the source of the broadcast. If we can neutralize that ship, the entire erasure process should collapse. He looked at Naruto. But their fleets are massive. A frontal assault is suicide. We would need a way to get a small strike team to the conductor, undetected. A plan was forming, a desperate, impossible strategy forged in the light of their new, terrifying reality. It was a plan that required magic to interpret the enemy's nature, technology to counter it, a tactician to find the weakness, and a blade sharp enough to strike the heart. And it needed a leader to make the final, impossible choice. Naruto looked at the faces of his team. He saw the grim determination, the flicker of fear, but the absolute lack of any hesitation. They were broken, they were misfits, they were disasters. And they were all looking at him, ready to follow him into the heart of the storm. The architects told me to write a good story, Naruto said, his voice quiet, yet it filled the room with an unshakable resolve. He looked up, his golden eyes burning with a fire that seemed to outshine the red light of the warning display. And the best stories are the ones where the heroes don't wait for the monsters to come knocking. The best stories are the ones where they go out and hunt the monsters themselves. He placed his hand on the red, glowing cube of data, and his own crimson gold energy flared, momentarily overpowering it. This is our home. This is our sanctuary. But our mission is bigger than that now. We're not just going to protect our story. We're going to protect the whole damn library. He looked at each of them in turn. A silent command, a shared promise. Alara, Valeria, I need a way to get us there, and I need that jamming device, small enough to carry. Sasuke, give them the exact frequency. I want a surgical strike. Not a sledgehammer. Yoruichi, sharpen your claws. You're our sword. His gaze was unwavering, his voice resonating with the full weight of his divine power and his human heart. He was no longer the lost boy, no longer the confused demigod. He was a leader, a guardian, a king of a court of strays. Our first mission begins now, he declared. We're taking the fight to the Cinder Chorus. No one cheered. No one needed to. A silent, unbreakable bond of purpose had been forged in that room. They were no longer refugees. They were a shield, a sword. They were the self-appointed, unlikely, and utterly ferocious guardians of all the stories that had ever been, and ever would be. The first line of their own book had just been written. And it was a declaration of war. Chapter 10 End.